Welcome everyone to our 21st annual Healthy Heart Day. Thank you for joining me on this event. It is incredible that this is our 21st year, and it's an honor for me to spend the next few hours with you. As many of you have attended Healthy Heart Day in the past, you know that we often have a theme for Healthy Heart Day. The theme for our event this year is Healthy Aging, living longer, but living healthier and living better. And who better to guide us on this journey of learning than our three expert speakers? First up will be a keynote speaker, Dr. Peter Lynn, a recurring presenter at Healthy Heart Day because he does such an exceptional job of teaching us the science of medicine. He'll be speaking to us about blue zones. You might have heard about these places. I think there's about 5 of them, maybe around the world. There was actually a Netflix special about them. These are areas where people appear to live longer. They live sometimes into their 90s and even past 100. But not only do they live longer, they seem to live healthier as they age. And Peter will be talking to us about what is special about this. What are they doing differently? What is the science of living longer? Next up will be another previous speaker from Healthy Heart Day, Dr. Sonja Reichert. Her provocative title to her talk is, If I Could Turn Back Time. And I think what Sonja means by that is, as we get older, can we actually live healthier? Can we actually potentially prevent chronic diseases and maybe even reverse them through lifestyle choices? I'm really excited to hear her presentation. After Sonja will be Dr. Michael Vallis from my alma mater at Dalhousie University, and he's going to be talking about how we can make these changes stick. If we're going to live longer, live healthier, we need to make lifestyle changes, not just for today and tomorrow, but really for the long term. And I know personally sometimes you can lose motivation to keep those changes going. At New Year's, we often set resolutions, and within a few weeks, a month or two, we forget about them, and we never end up implementing some of those changes that we wanted to make. And Dr. Vallis is going to give us tips on how we can do that, implement change for the long term. And at the end, my goal is to try to put this all together in what's termed lifestyle medicine. Can our lifestyle actually be a type of medicine that helps us live longer, live healthier? And my goal is to try to put all of this together for you. So let's get started. First up, I want to tell you there's some great news. Canadians are living longer. Over the last 100 years, life expectancy in Canada has gone up substantially. In the 1920s and 30s, just 100 years ago, the average life expectancy in Canada was in the mid-50s. But over the subsequent 100 years, there's been a dramatic increase in how long we're living. The average Canadian is going to live well into their 70s and 80s. A 30-year improvement in our life expectancy. How has that been achieved? Well, much of that has actually been achieved through a better understanding of the causes of heart disease, how to prevent it, and how to treat it effectively. Unfortunately, we still struggle with managing cancers, other chronic diseases, lung diseases, Alzheimer's, diabetes. Some of those diseases we haven't made nearly as much progress. But in heart disease, we know how to prevent it, how to treat it effectively, and prevent it from getting worse. It's really about adapting lifestyle changes, implementing them effectively, and carrying them forward. We're going to spend a lot of time this morning talking about still the #1 killer on our planet, heart disease, but a disease that we can potentially defeat. So, how have we made this enormous progress in heart disease? It's really come from a much better understanding of the root causes. What are the risk factors that lead to heart disease? High cholesterol, diabetes, blood pressure, smoking, other habits that contribute to the development of cardiovascular disease, to plaque formation, the risk of heart attacks and strokes. It's also about combating frailty. As we get older, we need to maintain physical activity, both aerobic activity and strength training, so we don't become frail, fall, fracture hips, become disabled. Eating healthy is an enormous aspect of healthy aging. Diets that are low in sugar, less salt, less processed foods, often termed DASH or Mediterranean diets, eating real, whole, healthy foods. And then it's about remaining engaged in society, preventing depression and social isolation. That's how we've made this progress. And we need to continue to implement these changes so we continue this journey of living longer and living healthier. As you go through this morning, there are some targets I want you to remember. We're going to come back to this again later. I want you to make sure you get your blood pressure checked regularly at your healthcare provider, at your local pharmacy, or maybe get your own blood pressure cuff. Keep your blood pressure controlled. It's something you can do. Know your number. I want you to always try to maintain your blood pressure below 130/80. You can do some of that through changes to your lifestyle, reducing salt intake, increasing physical activity. For people who have sleep disorders like sleep apnea, treatment of those can also help to control blood pressure. Know your cholesterol. Controlling cholesterol is essential for preventing plaque formation. Keep it as low as possible. There is no such thing as too low a cholesterol. Ideally, the bad cholesterol, or LDL, should be kept at least below 1.8. At least some of that you can do through a diet that's, again, low in fat, low in simple sugars, and higher fiber diet. But again, increasing physical activity is an important part of keeping your cholesterol controlled. For some people, though, diet and exercise might not be enough, and we have very effective, very well-researched medications that can help us augment and implement our strategies to lower cholesterol effectively. So if you end up needing medications, that's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're trying to do everything right. You're trying to work on your diet, your exercise, but sometimes we need help to get to those targets. Make sure you know your blood sugar. Keep it checked. There's an epidemic of obesity and diabetes in Canada. We need to find the disease early. We need to implement changes to prevent it from getting worse. So as we go down this journey of trying to live longer, there's also a concept of health span. We don't just want to extend lifespan, we want to extend health span. What is health span? So health span is the part of a person's life during which they're generally in good health. They're able to engage in the activities they want. They can stay connected with their families, friends, do all of the activities that they've always enjoyed and continue to do. The average life expectancy in Canada right now is about 81 years of age. But the average health span is only 73 years of age. So that means that the last 8 to 10 years of life, many people become very frail, they become impaired, they can have fractures and falls, become injured, disabled, sometimes they're housebound, or even hospitalized for extended lengths of time, a very unhealthy terminal number of years. The goal of lifestyle medicine is not only to help people live longer, but more importantly also to live healthier. We want people to enjoy those golden years, to stay as engaged in their community as possible. Lifestyle medicine focuses on 6 areas to improve health: healthy eating, physical activity, managing stress, forming and maintaining relationships, improving sleep, and avoiding risky substances and behaviors like smoking. By adopting these lifestyle changes, we can have an enormous impact on our heart health and our general health. And that's really the goal of Healthy Heart Day today. As you go through this morning, I want you to set SMART goals. This is a day for action. What are SMART goals? They are goals that are specific. Don't just say, I'm going to exercise more. You have to set a specific goal. I want to be able to walk a mile each day. It should be measurable, not just I want to walk more, but I want to walk a mile. It should be achievable and realistic. I know for myself, I couldn't run a marathon right now. I don't think my knees could take it. If I set that as a goal for myself, I would be frustrated that I couldn't achieve it. But Maybe I can walk half a marathon. Maybe I can walk a kilometer. Those are achievable, realistic goals for me. But it should also be time-bound, timely. When are you going to achieve those goals? So, I want to walk a mile 5 days a week in 2 months. That's a time-bound, timely action that you know that at the end of 2 months you can look back and say, yep, I achieved that. Or no, there was a specific reason why I couldn't. I'm going to redouble my efforts. Setting SMART goals, giving targets for yourself are essential. And that's really the goal of this day, is to give you the knowledge-based goals that I want you to set so you can implement a healthier, longer life. And our journey will be led by 3 expert speakers that I introduced you to earlier. But you know, I've had this quote up in previous Healthy Heart Days. I love this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Motion and physical activity is essential. And who better to guide us on that journey of physical activity than our exceptional health and wellness coach, Cindy Catton, a certified kinesiologist and personal trainer who will be coming to us many times this morning, teaching us simple exercises we can do at home to stay active, to stay engaged, and to lead a healthier, more fulfilling, complete life. It's going to be so much fun to work with Cindy this morning. But before we get started with our expert speakers, I have a surprise speaker for you. I'm so honored to be speaking with John New today. He is 101 years of age. He is a World War II veteran who now lives in Kitchener. Just last summer, I believe, he received the Legion of Honor by the French government for his part in liberating that country from Nazi occupation. John enlisted when he was only 19 years of age in Chatham, Ontario. It's such a privilege for me to be speaking with John this morning. There's so much that we can learn from him. At 101 years of age, he has no chronic illnesses. He's on no medications. He is so engaged in his community, so active. There's so much that I can learn from him, and he will be such an inspiration for you as well, I believe. I look forward to our discussion this morning, John. Well, thank you, John, for coming and speaking with me this morning. Tell me your secret. How did you live such a healthy, long life?
Quite frankly, Doctor, I don't know. When I was first born, I had bad coughing fits for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
They were so bad that my uncle, who was a carpenter, made a coffin for me.
Oh, my goodness.
We grew up in a small community in Romania where my parents were farmers, and we had nothing but good food. You can't beat good natural food.
You know, we need to get back to those basics, right? We need to go back to eating real foods, whole foods.
We are totally surrounded by, and bombarded by ads for this and ads for the other thing. The only sweet I got was from my paternal grandfather, who liked to bribe me, of course. And I was very fortunate until I was age 10. We were in Canada during the Depression years. 2 years of high school. Then I had to leave because my family needed the money.
Right.
I got a job. And at 19, I enlisted in the Army. But after I got into the Army, I practically existed on Coca-Cola and chocolate bars. They were almost free. It did my teeth no good whatsoever. I eventually had to go to a dentist. He shook his head. I can remember this. Very bad. So I wore dentures from that time on.
You know, sometimes you don't realize that those types of things that, you know, those sweets, those sugary drinks and things like that, the impact that it can have on things like your dental health, but also your general health. But obviously you've overcome that and you've kept your chin up. And certainly, you know, I've heard of your experiences during the Second World War.
I had the opportunity while I was in Germany to go to Belsen concentration camp.
Oh my gosh.
And what I saw there totally changed my life. I had what I can determine now was PTSD. The doctor in the unit was going to send me home. But a lieutenant took me under his wing, and we went around to units in Germany, making sure the people who had enough points to be rehabilitated to home, to Canada, were on their way. So that more or less saved me.
It's interesting you say that. A lot of things that I've read, and I'm sure you have as well. That ability to give back to people, to help other people in need. That's actually a very powerful healing thing for the individual themselves. Do you have any suggestions for Canadians as we're trying to struggle and deal with some of the crisis that's happening around us in the world?
I like reading about what happens to people. How do they roll with the punches, so to speak? Along
that vein, that spiritual connection, that community connection. I gather you were an Anglican minister
yes.
for a number of years?
As you might expect, with a congregation of a couple of hundred people, you're going to have people who have all kinds of life experiences. Of
course. That shared community, that willingness to help others and learn from others. There's so much that we can get from each other. Yes. In so many intangible ways.
We have to talk to one another.
Exactly. Yeah. No one is better than anyone else. We're all in this together.
We absolutely. Yeah. We'll all go out the same way too.
Exactly. In these times when there's a lot of people as they age, their memory starts to fail, or their cognition and risk of dementia and things like that. One of the things that, as healthcare providers, we really try to emphasize is people should stay engaged. They should read more like you do, try to be always inquisitive and keep our brains active. And again, I think you're a tribute to that, right? That you've had such a long, healthy life for 101 years.
When I reached my 60s, I had 2 bleeding ulcer sessions. The first one, I nearly died. That woke me up. Really woke me up. And I had a look at what I was doing with regard to my diet. I was eating reasonably good food, but I had then realized that I eat too much at one time. I began to eat slower, chewing my food well. And as you can see, I'm like you, not very much belly fat there, is there?
We're seeing an epidemic, as you know, of obesity in Canada and really around the world. And a lot of that, it has to do with the fact that people are eating really over-processed synthetic foods that are not real, that have high calorie contents, and they're just eating too much of it. The goal of this year's event is really to talk about healthy aging. As we get older, how can we live longer but also live healthier and stay engaged and stay active throughout our life, and certainly you're a testament to what we can achieve.
What little bit I have to tell, I hope some people will think about what I have said.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate
Pleasure.
This time.
Thank you, Doctor.
It was a phenomenal conversation. I so appreciate your time and all that you've accomplished through your life. You're a very humble person, and your life experiences are incredible. So.
Thank you.
It's both an honor and a pleasure to introduce Dr. Peter Lynn, a friend, a colleague, and a recurrent presenter at Healthy Heart Day. He is the Director of Primary Care Initiatives at the Canadian Heart Research Centre, a health correspondent for CBC Radio, and an accomplished educator. Dr. Lynn will discuss the blue zones and the science of living longer. Peter.
Thanks very much for the introduction, and it's always a pleasure to be here. And today I was asked to talk about the blue zone people. But before I start that, I'm going to say we're going to start at the end. Because like in medicine, we always start at the end of things. In other words, somebody dies and then we try to figure out what goes on in the beginning. So therefore, we're always handed a disease and then we have to go look up what caused that disease. In this case, let's say a massive heart attack, then we have to go understand why that was occurring. And so way back in 1948, they started a study called the Framingham Heart Study, where they took 5,000 people from the town of Framingham and they just followed everything that they did. They measured their blood pressure and cholesterol and those kinds of things to try and figure out what was driving heart disease and strokes and those kinds of things. And so by 1960, so 12 years later, they figured out that smoking was bad for you. Then in the year after that, they published that blood pressure and cholesterol are bad for you, and that obesity was bad for you. And then in 1974, diabetes was bad for you, and psychological effects was bad for you as well. In other words, stress and those kinds of things. And then finally in 1981, they connected diet was being bad for you as well, depending on what you ate. And so by 1998, they had a risk equation where they can use a math formula to calculate your risk of having a heart attack or stroke or dying. And so all of a sudden, we're taking this black box and then we're trying to take apart the black box to figure out what's driving heart disease. And so they were able to come out with calculations like this: your lifetime risk of having a heart attack or stroke. So if you had all the risk factors were perfect, in other words, you didn't have high blood pressure or anything like that, then it's basically 5% over your lifetime that you would have a heart attack. However, if you had two or more of the major risk factors, like, high blood pressure, cholesterol, smoking, that kind of thing, then your risk was more like almost 70%. And then in between, if you had one or two or more risk factors, you had more and more risk. Then you had more and more chances of having a heart attack or a stroke. In women, it was the same thing. The numbers are slightly lower, but the same concept. The more risk factors you had, the higher your risk of having an event. And so we are able to come up with this idea that these are the things that drive this little black box of what was causing people to have heart attacks and strokes. I love this one. This is the cat that's sitting there with the little remote control. And so the bottom line is that we now figured out that not moving is also bad. So in other words, having high blood pressure, those kinds of things is really bad, but not moving around was also increasing heart disease as well. So we're beginning to piece together the reasons why heart disease occurs over this sort of 50-year block of time. Now, I love this picture. She's smoking and lighting up the 100th birthday candle. Now, she'll never quit smoking for you. And definitely if you smoke, I don't think you're going to reach 100 in general. However, there are places where people live past 100 in a very high percentage of people. And so one of the National Geographic reporters wanted to figure out why. So basically on a big map, he circled out all the places where there were people above 100 in unusual numbers. And he circled it with the little blue marker, and those were known as the blue zones. And so he visited all those blue zones to try and understand what is different about them and why is it that they're able to live such a long life. So they were trying to figure out what is special about this population. And as you can see here, the blue zone areas, they're kind of all over the world. So you've got Japan on this side, you've got Greece, Italy, you've got Costa Rica, and you've got California. So these people are not related to each other. So genetically, what they're born with is most likely quite different. They're not the same. And their lifestyle is probably very different. And yet you have these people living past 100. And so that's where this journalist went off to try and figure out what is so special about these particular people. And so they published some of these things as to what they were doing in a set of photos in part of their articles. And they were showing these elderly people doing things and part of community. And they were showing people, doing chores. In other words, they get up in the morning because there's a reason to get up, because they have to go do those chores. This was an older man that was fixing a fence. And the story goes, the reporter went to him. He goes, "Why are you fixing the fence?" And he looked back confused and he said, "Because it's broken," right? In other words, like, of course I'd be fixing the fence. So it was not news to him that he was old. The thing that was news to him, that being old, he shouldn't be fixing the fence. And so purpose in life is very important for them. Here's a lady that's doing a handstand that we would all wish we can do. And they were doing all sorts of things that you would not think the elderly should be able to do at that kind of age. And so the question was, what was special about these people? What was the magic ingredient that allowed them to live so long? And one possibility is community. So in other words, they're part of a big community all the time, and they share food together, they share stories together. There's a feeling of belonging. And so people are trying to figure out what is the magic formula. So they started looking at the food. So here's Italy, and you can see 47% is whole grain and 26% is dairy, 12% vegetables, okay? And then when they looked at Japan, you could see it's totally different. 67 sweet potatoes, or 67% sweet potatoes, 12% rice. So that's quite different. And if you go to California, you've got vegetables, fruits, and legumes, and dairy kind of split all over the place. And if you went to Greece, you see vegetables and greens and fruits and legumes and potatoes and olive oil. So in other words, it wasn't the same formula that people were using. Here's Costa Rica, again, a different mix of foods. So it wasn't because they ate some magical special food that they were actually living longer. They're actually eating quite different foods and diverse foods. So they started looking at maybe there's an overlap. Maybe you don't have to have the exact same diet or lifestyle, but at least it's the overlap. What's the common things? So if you look at this little Venn diagram of Japan, Italy, and California, you could see that there is a commonality in the middle. So in the red, I've marked off family. In other words, that feeling of belonging, you're with people, people care about you, you care about other people is there. No smoking, plant-based foods mainly. Not all plant-based foods, it's not all vegetarian, but definitely more towards the plant food. Constant activity, in other words, moving around all the time. Not a gym. This is constant activity, moving around, walking, doing those things, doing your chores. Social engagement. So we're back to the belonging and sort of with friends and be happy. And then last one is legumes as well. So these were the commonalities that they were seeing amongst these three regions. And perhaps it's the common things that's driving this longevity. And so therefore they published and they said, let us try and summarize what we learned. Number one is that basically move naturally. Now, notice they said naturally, not with a machine or a treadmill or anything like that. Move on your own. In other words, walk and do these kinds of things, and that's going to be healthy for you. Number two is eat wisely. In other words, don't go crazy on eating more plant kind of food, that kind of thing. And then the right tribe. And that was interesting the way they phrased it. In other words, the right people. You know, that could be family, that could be your friends, but the right tribe to get you into the right mindset. And that puts us to the last one, which is the right outlook. In other words, not too stressed out. We want to make sure that you see the future as being positive and happy, and then therefore you're looking forward to it. So they sort of boiled it down to these kind of four big buckets of things, but they broke it down into 9 little components that we can all try to mimic. So the very first one is this business of move naturally. So in other words, walk around and move around. And the reason why that's good is because your muscles are doing work at that point. And if your muscles are working, then you have to increase blood flow to those muscles. In other words, you got to keep the pipes big to supply muscles to your legs, for example. And if you have big pipes, then it's easier for the heart to pump. As opposed to pumping to a tiny little tight pipe, the heart now it's easy to pump into large pipes and send the blood flow to your legs. And then if you're sending blood flow, you're sending nutrients. So therefore the muscles are burning up sugar because they're moving. So therefore they need fuel. So now you're burning up sugar and calories, and therefore that would control your weight as well so that you don't become obese. And then finally, you get to oil up the joints. You know how the joints go, you know, when you open up a chicken wing, you see the shiny stuff. That shiny stuff is actually cartilage, and that's the smooth surfaces that the joints should be rubbing against each other. And the only way those surfaces get food is actually liquid that's there. So the liquid in the joint is the buffet, and if you keep the joint moving, the buffet is fresh, and so therefore the cartilage will get good food, and therefore they can stay intact for you. So then we can cut down on the chance of you getting arthritis and all those other things as well. So therefore, just moving naturally seems like a good idea. The second block was the right outlook. And here they put down 2 things: purpose in life. In other words, you know, look at this girl. She's got determination. She's got purpose. She's got direction. And so that's the whole idea, is that you want to be able to wake up and say, I have something to do today, as opposed to I wake up and it's another boring day, as we have seen before. So therefore, purpose in life, I think, is very important for people. And then the next one is downshifting. Now, what do they mean by that? Relax. In other words, let's not work ourselves up. Let's not get stressed out, because when you get stressed out, that's when you're going to have your fight or flight system, and that's not going to be good for your system overall. The next section is eat wisely. So in other words, here they give you 3 simple rules. The first one is 80% rule. In other words, let's not eat too much, because when we eat a lot of food, now you gain weight and things like that. And a lot of times it's the speed at which we eat, right? Like we swallow food down there. I remember this one patient, she loved those chocolate bars, you know, the ones, the little squares. And I watched her eat a chocolate bar. She opened a brand new one and she ate it like this. She went, you know, like this. And I said, what are you doing? She said, it tastes so good. You know, I just eat it. So I said, you're not tasting anything. You're just swallowing. And what she didn't realize was that your taste buds are on the back of your tongue. And so therefore, the moment you swallow, there's no more joy. So therefore, if we can let something sort of hang out with your taste buds, and your brain will think you had a lot of it. So we taught her to just break one piece of chocolate, put it on her tongue and let it melt. And that way her brain is getting chocolate, 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 chocolate. And eventually the brain says, okay, look, you've had 10 pounds of chocolate already. It's time to stop. And so therefore, letting food stay within your mouth to tickle those taste buds is a good idea. And we learned about this when people had those procedures where they had the collars put on their stomach, and they lost a lot of weight. So I actually asked some of these people that had the procedure done, I said, what made you lose weight? And I thought they were going to say the surgery. But what they said was we eat very slowly because we have to chew the food so it doesn't get stuck. But because we eat slowly, we feel satisfied. And that was the key word. In other words, the brain said, wow, you've had a lot of meat because you're chewing the same meat over and over again. So therefore, you can stop now. So therefore, we can actually make your brain feel that you've had a lot of it. And I actually tried this with an apple. I usually eat an apple in like 5 seconds, but this time I cut it into slivers that was the size of my finger. So I had a whole bunch of slivers and I just ate one sliver at a time. I didn't slow down too much, but I just ate one sliver at a time. And I couldn't finish the apple. Halfway through, my brain said, you've had a lot of apple. It's time to stop. So perhaps letting the food hang around in your mouth, let the taste buds send signals, is a very good way to keep us from overeating. Because once you put the food down, your stomach system is very slow to tell you you're full. And the reason for that is because in nature, we never had too much food. It was more about not enough food. So therefore, the system where the stomach is full and sends a signal up takes a long time because it's not really that important. We've never had too much food in the past. And so therefore, just take your food slower, let it hang out with your taste buds, and you won't eat as much and you won't gain too much weight. The second one is plant slant. So they didn't say vegetarian. They just said, if you can choose some vegetables and plant-based stuff, that would be better. And so therefore you can eat that. And so basically we can get full on that, right? Because it's a lot of fiber and stuff like that in there. But also on top of that, it gives you your minerals and nutrients. So eat a colorful plate because the color will bring you all the nutrients. And to get color, you have to move into your vegetables and things like that. So meat is all brown. And so therefore we need to introduce color into your plate. And then finally over here, this is a little controversial, and that's wine. So a small bit of wine they're saying might be helpful. And so in this case, what people are saying is that if you look at alcohol, if you look at heart disease and cancer and stuff like that, any wine will increase your risk a little bit. And so therefore the current recommendation is none is better. Okay. So if you don't drink, do not start drinking, stay without drinking. But if you do drink, cut it back down to 1. In other words, the goal is to reduce the amount of alcohol and therefore decrease any of the complications that might come with it. And then the final section is connection. So the connect section. And in this case, they're basically saying you want to be part of the right tribe. I like the way they use the word tribe. So it's kind of like animals, the antelope are together in their herd. And by being in the herd, it's better than being by yourself. So there's a feeling of safety amongst numbers. And so that's why being part of a community is helpful, because then your body's not going to freak out that you're in danger. So think about it this way. Let's say you go out camping or something like that, or hiking with your friends, and it's now dark and you get separated from your friends. So now you're lost in the dark. Now you're going to be scared, right? So you're going to be in the fight or flight mode. That is not going to be good for your system. And once you find them again, you can imagine your stress and anxiety would drop down. So imagine being part of the herd all the time. Stress and anxiety will be down. Whereas when you're by yourself, then basically you're going to have a lot more situations of stress and anxiety. So that's why being part of the tribe will help you to relax so that you don't have to always think about defending yourself, those kinds of things. And so therefore, loved ones first, take care of your family, they take care of you. And then you have that feeling of belonging to a particular group, which means now you have safety in numbers as well. So these are sort of the 9 things that they were saying that might be useful for us to break down into the components that maybe we can mimic in our lives so that we can be more like those blue zone people. So therefore, move, eat wisely, right outlook, and then finally connected. So within each one, they give you a couple of suggestions, but those are the 4 big areas that we should be aiming for. I also noticed that they don't cook with high temperature. You know how we do the high temperature cooking? This is like me barbecuing, burning everything. So whenever we put in a lot of energy, we could make chemicals hit each other, and then they make new chemicals. And some of those new chemicals might not be so good with us. So when we add in a lot of energy, we can create new chemicals that may not be so healthy for us. So over there, what they do is have a lot of slow cooking, like slow cooking pot kind of things. And so you're stewing things. And what that does is that with very low temperature, you can break down the food so it's easier to digest for us so we can get all the nutrients out. But at the same time, we're not putting in a lot of energy, so we're not creating new chemicals that might be harmful for us. So start looking at sort of low temperature cooking. Even if you were trying to cook the meats, we don't want to have the high temperature flames going. We want to sort of cover it and then let the heat kind of work at it slowly, as opposed to this high temperature cooking kind of thing. The microbiome is interesting. So these are all the bacteria that we have on our body that's helping us. So in our bowel, we have a lot of bacteria that's sitting there. helping us do things. So the way you want to look at it is our genetic code, our sort of DNA recipe book. We can, let's say, make 23,000 or 25,000 kind of different enzymes and those kinds of things, somewhere in that neighborhood. But the bacteria that we carry with us, their DNA recipe book is somewhere around 3.3 million. So they can make many different enzymes that we can't make. And those enzymes may help us break down food so that then we can absorb it. So they break it down for us and then we absorb it. Or they might be able to get rid of some toxic stuff. So they break it down so the toxic stuff never reaches us. So that's why we need to be kind to our microbiome. So therefore, eat a variety of foods. So therefore, there's many different types of bacteria that can be in your bowel. And number two is fiber. They love fiber. That's kind of like their fuel. And so that might be helpful for them. And if we can avoid antibiotics, unnecessary antibiotics. If you have an infection, we have to take antibiotics, but unnecessary ones where you've got a cold and then you start taking antibiotics, that will actually kill off some of your good guys and therefore make you weaker in the future because you can't process off a lot of things. So just a little thought process about microbiome: variety of foods, avoid antibiotics if not necessary, and basically try to feed them a little fiber, and that way your microbiome will be healthy and happy. This is a funny picture. It's about these telomeres on chromosomes. So you know how our DNA is like the blueprint of life, but it's curled up tightly into these chromosomes that we, sort of draw like an X. But on the tips of these chromosomes, there's a little cap, kind of like the cap on your shoelaces. There's a little cap that sort of caps off the ends, and those caps are called telomeres. And what we could do is measure the length of those caps, and we could tell you the age. So the reason why that works is that every time we divide, those little telomere, let's say they're this long, every time a cell divides into two, we have to take that chromosome and unravel it. We have to take the cap off, so to speak, and then unravel it, and then we make a copy of it. So now we create two chromosomes, and then we rewrap them back up, and then the cap goes and sits on top. But every time we do that, the telomere gets a little shorter. Okay, so every time we divide the cell and we pull them apart and put them back together, that little cap gets a little shorter and a little shorter and a little shorter and a little shorter. And eventually it's so short it can't hold anything together. So now the DNA unravels and that cell no longer can live. So that's the idea of these telomere lengthening kind of things. So when we understand this telomere business, then all of a sudden we can think about things that might speed things up. In other words, speed up aging. So like smoking, obesity, diabetes, stress, lack of sleep, those things you can imagine could all speed things up and therefore use up some of that telomere length. And so that's why when we look at people with these situations, we see that their telomeres are shorter. In other words, as if they're aging faster. So for example, smoking, when we smoke something, we're burning something. And unfortunately, it's not a perfect burn, right? It's not enough oxygen to burn it. So then instead of burning it to carbon dioxide and water, which you can't see, you create all these chemicals in between that is not completely burned. And that's why we see smoke floating around. Now, if you were to breathe in all that smoke, there's a lot of particles in there, and that can settle inside your lungs, for example. So let's say this is an X-ray of your lung, and this is what your lung tissue looks like. It's very elasticy. So that's why we can, breathe and then let it come back together. It's like an accordion. But unfortunately, when you breathe in all that stuff, let's say from cigarette smoke or pollution, then you get all these little tiny particles sitting there. And the ones that were in particular interest is PM 2.5, which stands for particulate matter 2.5 microns in size. And at that size, your body thinks that it's a bacteria. So therefore, it's going to pour chemicals onto it and try to kill it off. But unfortunately, it's not going to die. It's just a piece of chemical. And so your body keeps pouring stuff on there. And unfortunately, eventually, it eats up the lung. Your own cells that are pouring all those chemicals on end up making those cells divide a lot because those cells are getting hurt. So now you have to make new cells. And so now you're dividing. So now the telomeres are getting shorter. The cells are going to age. Sometimes they die. And you end up having lung that looks like this. It's full of holes. So all those cells were killed because we were trying to get rid of these particles that we have breathed in, either from smoke or from pollution. So therefore, you can imagine that smoking would speed up damage to the area. And then because your cells are trying to repair, they have to divide more often. Therefore, you're shortening the lives of those things. So let's say these cells normally divide once every 6 months. But now, because of the smoking, it has to divide every 6 weeks. So you can imagine that everything is going to be used up a whole lot quicker as well. And so that's why when we look at these telomeres and we look at this list, we can see that some of those things are things that we're doing, right? And the one that I mark out is the stress. Okay, so stress and lack of sleep, they kind of go together. But stress definitely is the fight or flight situation. And so therefore you can imagine your heart rate is going to be higher, your blood pressure is going to be higher, your sugar is going to be higher because you need to run for your life or you need to fight. So all of these things go up. And so that will accelerate diseases that are there. And you've seen that, right? People that are working, no sleep, not eating well, under a lot of stress, they age very quickly. So during the pandemic, a lot of the healthcare workers were working double and triple shifts, and you can see people aging in front of your eyes. Some of our politicians, they go into, as they're elected, they're young and healthy looking, and then as they progress over the years, they tend to look very old very quickly. So if you look at stress, this is what stress is all about, right? So I'm sure this ostrich is in the fight or flight response right now. And so therefore the heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, glucose goes up. So all of those things are good because it helps the ostrich get out of the way. Now, these little adventures don't last very long, right? They're just up and down. So within a couple of minutes, either the ostrich has made it out there or it's somebody's dinner, so it doesn't take long. So that's why we don't mind full out during those couple of minutes, because it's not going to cause any harm because you're really literally running for your life. On the other hand, you and I look more like this, right? So our stress level, our fight or flight is triggered by these kind of situations, being late for work or something like that. So if we were to put ourselves here, instead of the ostrich, so basically it's not up and down anymore, right? It's more like up, and it stays up for the whole day. And during the day, we have more up and downs on top of that. So you can imagine that our heart rate, blood pressure, and sugar are going to be high all the time. So that's why we have more heart disease, more high blood pressure, more diabetes. And so these are the concepts that may be driving all of these conditions that we are seeing with people that are more stressed out than not. What happens to your cells? Well, if you're doing all this stuff, you're burning out the cells quicker. So the cells have to replicate themselves more often. And so therefore, you're going to make more divisions. If you're making more little cells, those little telomeres are going to get shorter and shorter, and eventually they won't be able to work anymore. And then we would see our aging process as those telomeres get too short, for example. The other thing that we're interested in is microplastic. So this is a guy drinking from a plastic bottle. And microplastic is interesting. We used to think about it as we throw the plastic bottle into the water, and then the ocean, the fish eat it, and then we eat the fish. And that's how we get microplastic. But that's not true, right? Because we're the first user of the plastic. The fish is sort of like the second-hand user, and then we eat the fish, that's third-hand user, right? But really, we're the first-hand user. We actually use the plastic itself. And so some of this plastic can get into your body as well. And so what they found recently was a study where the surgeons were taking out the cholesterol in the artery in the neck to try and prevent a stroke from happening in these patients. What they did was they took the cholesterol out and they sent it to a big electron microscope to look at it, to look for microplastic. And that's what they found, little pieces of plastic inside the carotid artery, inside the plaque that's sitting there. And if you look at the macrophages, these are our army cells that go and fight for us. Just outside these army cells, you can see the plastic sitting here. And then if you look inside the army cells, the macrophages, you can see the plastic sitting here. So in other words, it's made it inside your army cells as well. And they can also carry chemicals. So now we're carrying chemicals inside your body, which might not be so healthy for you. The scary part is when they looked at heart attacks, strokes, and death 3.5 years later, over that period, if you didn't have any plastic inside there, this is your heart attack, stroke, or death rate. So it's quite low. However, if you had plastic in that plaque, then your heart attack, stroke, and death is actually much higher, 4.5 times higher. And that's because we might have taken this piece out, but there might be plastic elsewhere causing inflammation and those kinds of things. So therefore, if we can reduce plastic inside our body, that's always a good thing. Now, where do we get plastic exposure? So if I show you this, basically it's everywhere, right? When you look around in your kitchen and things like that. So can we look around these things and say, can I replace it with wood? Can I replace it with metal? Can I replace it with glass? Because those things tend not to break down so much. The wood, we just have to be careful, like a wood cutting board, unfortunately might, collect bacteria. So you're supposed to put oils and stuff like that to treat it. But nonetheless, a plastic cutting board, you might be putting more plastic into the food than we might normally have. For your baby, we have to think about all the plastics that they're around, right? So definitely the plastic baby bottles and things like that, even the formulas in the plastic bags. So we would have to rethink, and we boiled all that plastic. So high temperature and plastic together is not good because you'll make more of these microplastics come out. So have a look around your children's area to see, can we cut down on the plastic, and what they're sticking into their mouth and sucking on would also be important as well. And so one of the things that we have to remember is temperature and plastic. So that hot water bottle in your car probably has more microplastic in the water itself because of the heat. So if we can avoid heat and plastic together, that would be a good thing, which means no microwaving things that are in plastic containers. So use a glass container, use the Corelware or whatever kind of stuff, but not the plasticware going into the microwave with the high temperatures. And washing your plastic things in the dishwasher, there's high temperature there. But you're not going to get that high temperature plastic because that goes into the drainage. But that will go into the environment, and therefore it will pollute our waters at some point. So perhaps if you want to wash the plastic by hand, I know that sounds terrible, but at least without the high temperature, then we cut down on the amount of plastic going into the drain as well. This guy's going into his dryer, and that's because he's looking for his polyester shirt. And polyester is a plastic. And so therefore, when we're using a dryer, that lint filter that you pull out may have some small plastic in there. So when you're changing the lint filter, trying to clean it, please don't breathe in all the lint. So sort of hold your breath so that you're not sucking in all the lint and everything else. And when you see the sun come in through and you see all these little particles, we used to tell people this is your dead skin cell, which is true. But now there's also some microplastic that's there as well. So therefore, we can eat plastic inside, and we can also breathe it in. And if you use a lot of lotions in plastic bottles, you can get some through your skin as well. So these are all the places that we can get it. So perhaps hang drying your clothing might be a good idea instead of using the dryer. You might save a few dollars on your electricity bill as well. Tea bags started using some plastic in them to make them more durable and a little tougher, so that they don't fall apart. But unfortunately, you put the tea bag with plastic in it into hot water, and now you make microplastic from your tea bags. Now, some companies have now said we do not use plastic in our tea bags, so those ones should be okay. Or if you want to do it, just use a strainer. So have the tea strainer, put it in hot water. In other words, the old-fashioned way, if you want to get rid of any chance from plastic from your tea bag. So if you're a big tea drinker, maybe we go towards that as well. And what about plastic on our food? There's a lot of plastic wrap on our food. And so the recommendation was very simple, just rinse it off, because the plastic is just sitting on the surface. So rinse it off, and that way we can wash off the plastic that's there. Like I said, if you're going to be cutting on a plastic cutting board, that might be a problem. A wooden cutting board that's been treated so no bacteria would be a good idea. Or if you want to put parchment paper, that might be able to block it off, depending on how sharp your knife is cutting through. But nonetheless, just think a little bit about it, and you can reduce the amount of plastic that's sitting there. So perhaps we look at the 9 things that we talked about, this summarized as move, eat wisely, right, outlook, and connected. Perhaps we just add 2 more. So one is, let's cut down on microplastic, and let's also cut down on the pollution that we're breathing in, perhaps. And by doing that, we can reduce the risk inside our system as well. So it's very interesting. There was, I saw this one time, they said, the word illness, okay? If you take away the I and you replace it with a we, then you get wellness. And so therefore, that's kind of a neat trick, that illness becomes wellness when we take away I and we come up with a we. And so this is the concept that's very simple. If we work together, we have less stress, right? So we're helping each other out. It's going to be less stressful that we're working together. If we walk together, then we're more likely to exercise. So in other words, if you and I have a date for tomorrow to go and exercise, I'm not going to say, oh, I don't want to do it, because I don't want to disappoint you. So then I'm more likely to show up. So that's why when people have groups going out, they're more likely to do the exercise than by themselves, because by themselves, I'll say, oh, it's raining out, I don't want to do it. Whereas for other people, you're more willing to go out and say, well, they're going to be there, so I might as well be there. If we eat together, then we tend to have better food. So instead of eating your, toast and tea, we can actually have decent food, right? Even if you're going out to a restaurant, if you go out by yourself, you can only have this thing. Whereas if you go out with 5 or 6 people, you can have multiple dishes that you can share even. So therefore you get more variety, different types of food coming into your system, different microbiome, healthier microbiome, that kind of thing. And finally, if we laugh together, then, well-being and happiness is going to be there.
And I think sort of being together gives you purpose to get up and go, but also being able to share in that community and share in the joys, So if somebody does well in the community, everybody's happy for that person. So therefore the whole group is now happier. And interestingly, if something bad happens, if you're surrounded by people, then you feel supported. And so everybody has a good feeling that we can take care of each other. So I think if you look at the blue zone areas, that would be one of the critical things, is this sense of community where they're belonging. And here, with Dr. Pandey and Michelle Pandey and all their leadership, basically what they've done is they've created a community. And so they've created a community where we can sort of strive to be healthy, and we're striving to be healthy together. And so therefore we can share each other in terms of our experiences and also help each other along. So if you got through something, then you can help spread that to somebody else. Like that little piece of chocolate, letting it melt on your mouth. My patient now has told her family and all her friends about this trick about controlling how much you eat and not starving. So not once did she say that she's missing chocolate, because her brain says you've eaten 10 pounds of chocolate from that little piece melting. So these are tricks and trades that we can share with people. And the more you share with others, the healthier everybody gets. And so therefore, hopefully we will all lead a good long life like they do in the blue zone areas. Anyway, thank you very much for staying awake, and thank you for the opportunity to present at this meeting. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Peter. That was lighthearted but inspirational. What an education. To you, the audience, what SMART goals were you able to create from his talk? Remember, this event is about you. I need you to set SMART goals that you will implement and go forward with.
I'm Jennifer Michaud. 3.5 years ago, I had open heart surgery to replace my aortic valve. I was born with a heart condition. I was born with aortic stenosis. What really changed for me with my condition was when I received the news that I had to have open heart surgery. To be put back together with glue and with stainless steel and with stitches, and then to be expected to go back to normal life. Research is so important to me because I am not done my heart surgery journey. I have a bioprosthetic valve implanted, which means in about 15 to 20 years, I'm going to need another surgery.
Cindy Catton is a registered kinesiologist and personal trainer who specializes in exercise programming for complex medical conditions such as diabetes and heart disease. Cindy, we are ready for our first workout of the day.
We're starting with some aerobic exercise. If you'd like to join me, please sit up nice and tall, keep your shoulders down and back. Here we go. Just a little toe taps to get our muscles moving, get the blood flowing a little bit. If you're sitting on the couch, I need you to move forward a little bit so you're nice and tall. If you're working through in the kitchen or some other place in the house, I'm glad you're joining me today. Shoulders back, nice and tall. Inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Good, here we go. We're gonna make it a little bit more intense. Start to march on the spot. Lift the feet off the ground, lift the knees up. Keep the core nice and strong. Good. Shoulders down and back, and don't forget to breathe. Here we go. We're gonna add in a little bit more intensity. Keep those feet moving, knees up, and exercise the arms. Good. Elevate the shoulders a little bit, lift the elbows. Feel a little bit of movement through the arms. Keep working the legs at the same time. Looking good. Here we go. We're gonna switch it up again. Relax the arms down, shoulders back, and go back to those toe taps. Good. Nice and tall, abs are strong. Feeling good this morning. Inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Good. We're gonna switch it up again. Little kicks out front. Doesn't have to be too intense right now, but make sure the core is nice and strong. Good. Press those legs out and feel the quadriceps working a little bit. You got it. Okay, we're adding in a little bit more intensity. Here we go, arms out front, one at a time. Push forward. You can do opposite arm, opposite leg. You can do same leg, same arm, whatever you're comfortable with. Just keep moving. You got it. How are we feeling, everyone? Keep breathing. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Nice and strong with those movements. I like it. Looking good. We got a few more here. Okay, we're gonna switch again, last one, and go back to those toe taps. Good, nice and tall, nice and strong through the shoulders, roll them back. Sit up straight. I know, I say it all the time. Keep going. Good, shoulder roll back. Inhale, exhale, and march again. Nice and strong. Pull in those abdominals. Keep the back nice and straight. Spine nice and tall. Good. Here we go. A little bit more intensity. Overhead this time. Press up. Press up. Same leg, same arm. It's okay. Opposite arm, opposite leg. Whatever you can do at home to keep yourself moving. Looking good. Stay strong. A few more here. Keep those feet moving. Keep the arms moving. We're almost there. Last one. Good. Back to toe taps. Always want to make sure you've got a little bit of movement throughout the body while we're exercising. Good. Inhale and exhale. Good. Keep moving. Let's go back to that first one again. Marching on the spot, add in the shoulders. Here we go. Looking good. Moving the body, keeping the abdominals strong. Back nice and tall, nice and straight. I like it. One more. Good, we're switching again. I know, no breaks this time. Straight out front with those kicks. Good, add in the arms when you're ready. Out front, out front. Opposite arm, opposite leg, same arm, same leg. It's okay, keep moving. Good, keep breathing. Don't forget that part. We're almost there, team. Keep going. Okay, it's overhead. Keep the kicks up. Press up, press up. Good stuff. I like it. We're almost there. A few more for me. Good, last one. Perfect. Okay, toe taps. This is your break. Good, inhale. And exhale, shoulder roll back. Nice work, team.
Thank you, Cindy, for showing us these great exercises we can do in the comfort of our own home. Next up, it's a real honor for me to introduce you to Dr. Sonja Reichert. She is a primary care physician, associate professor at Western University, American Board of Medicine diplomat, and clinician researcher. Dr. Reichert is the current research chair at Western University in London, Ontario. She's a primary care researcher with a focus on diabetes, obesity, and the integration of exercise as medicine. Dr. Reichert has published many peer-reviewed papers in award-winning journals. She is a teacher that has taught us so many things. Dr. Reichert holds a BSc in kinesiology from the University of Waterloo, an MSc in exercise physiology from the University of Toronto, and her MD degree from McMaster University. Sonja.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pandey, for the very kind introduction. Now, when Dr. Pandey and the group of us, we were debating what this year's topics would be about, Dr. Pandey was really inspired by Cher, and specifically her song, If I Could Turn Back Time. So we wondered, is it possible to age in a healthy and functional way, but perhaps avoid the declines and the negative impacts of aging? In other words, is it possible to turn back time? And while aging is such a privilege and so important that we do age, it is also important that we age well. So with that, we'll be exploring the topics of muscle and the brain, how to have strong, healthy muscles and how to have a healthy brain. And I'd really like to thank my master's supervisor, Dr. Jack Goodman. So almost 20 years ago, I actually became interested in the topic of muscle, and specifically in patients who'd had a heart attack, and how building muscle actually helped them feel stronger and healthier. And this was really, 20, 30 years ago was really the start of us to understand the power of muscle and aging. So specifically, we'll discuss these 3 topics. We'll learn about brain and muscle development and also decline. And then we'll find opportunities to turn back time. And lastly, we'll put the ideas that I've presented into action. So just as I did last year, I have a legend for learning. So this might be a time to pause the video and grab a pencil and a piece of paper. And don't worry about remembering these colors, but basically I'll highlight different sections of this presentation. For example, messages in red will be key takeaway messages. Things I've underlined in yellow will be information or scientific data. And then I'll highlight what's new and also questions to ask yourself. So we'll start with the developmental stages of brain and muscle mass. And the key takeaway here is that unfortunately, peak development of muscle peaks at about age 30. But that doesn't mean we can't prevent or minimize decline. So as early as age 40, we actually understand that muscles start to lose strength, and this often becomes progressive. And for women, the decline in muscle becomes even more rapid around menopause or those extreme hormonal shifts. And this is my public service announcement, especially for the women listening today, to consider resistance or strength training. And just to help orient you, I'll be talking about strengthening muscle by using resistance or strength training. So the 2 terms are really interchangeable, but basically they're any form that loads the muscle or makes it have to work a little harder, like lifting a grocery bag or lifting a heavy bag of kitty litter into the car. That's using your muscles. And this decline is actually called sarcopenia. It is now a defined medical term. And cognitive decline also happens with aging, but this is more variable depending on the person. So we've all sort of seen the scheme at the bottom of the slide here. We start out as babies, we grow and develop. By age 30, we're at our peak. And then often as we age, we decline. But let's find out how to fight against that decline. Aging is inevitable, but we don't have to go softly into the night. So what is sarcopenia? Specifically, it is a reduction of 3 components of muscle. So muscle mass, muscle strength, and muscle performance. And it's really that decline in muscle strength that happens after age 40. And once you have the triad of both being reduced, that's when we would clinically diagnose sarcopenia. So what are the risk factors for losing muscle mass? Well, aging is one of them. And of course, there's nothing we can or want to do. Again, we want to age. But being inactive is a risk factor, as well as obesity and certain chronic diseases such as COPD and diabetes. In other words, these chronic diseases actually inhibit or impair healthy muscle function. Again, you can do something about it, but it's important to know that if you have arthritis or these chronic diseases, your muscles might not be as strong as someone the same age as you who doesn't have these chronic diseases. So let's dive into what is muscle a little bit further. So essentially there's 3 different kinds: smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. And smooth muscle is the muscle that we can't even feel is working. That's the muscle in our colons and our bowels. Cardiac muscle is, of course, the muscle that helps our heart contract. And I'll be focusing on skeletal muscle. So did you know that muscle is actually now considered an organ and is actually makes up 40% of our body weight, give or take. Bodybuilders will have more of that percentage of their weight, but on average about 40% of our body is made of muscle. So this is a really important organ, and it's often not talked about. In fact, I didn't even learn that much about it in medical school beyond, osteoarthritis and different, muscle-specific problems. But muscles are actually active, and they control our metabolism, blood sugar levels, bone, joint, and brain health. And I'll be really making that connection between healthy muscles, healthy brains, and how they talk to each other a little bit later. So again, aerobic activity like walking is great for your mood, cardiovascular system, and your brain, but strength training that targets our skeletal muscle impacts functional abilities. So those abilities to carry our groceries, lift our grandchildren, and do the things we want to do as we get older. So if we focus now on the brain and specifically dementia, there's often a progression of symptoms. It often starts out with mild cognitive impairment. We might start realizing we're forgetting where we put our keys, where things were left, names of different people. And then, this can of course progress all the way to Alzheimer's disease. But dementia essentially affects your cognitive ability, memories, and behavior. And the risk factors for these are, again, both modifiable and non-modifiable. Non-modifiable risk factors are age and family history, but how we eat and move and sleep, many of the things that Dr. Lynn spoke about help our brains stay healthy. And being physically active is a key component of healthy brain aging. Now, I'll give an example of how closely the brain and muscles are related. And the concept is known as proprioception, which means the body knows where its limbs are in space without you even looking. So for example, if I stand on one leg, close my eyes, and put my arm up, I know that my arm is at 30 degrees without even looking at my arm. Well, as you can imagine, proprioception is super important when we're walking to prevent falls. So our brain is sending signals to our muscles, which take in those signals to know what our brain is telling it to do. And our muscles, send signals to the brain. So it's really that brain-muscle pathway that allows proprioception to happen. So risk factors, for the topics I've just spoken about, take a minute and ask yourself, have I noticed any symptoms of sarcopenia or muscle weakness? For example, am I feeling unsteady when I'm walking? Do I feel that myself or someone I love is starting to show the signs of cognitive impairment? Are there any modifiable risk factors that I just spoke about that you might be interested in modifying? And the last point as a family physician I'll make is really important. If you do think you're starting to see a slip in your cognitive ability, please see your healthcare professional. So many of my patients are scared to admit if they're seeing changes in their memory because they're worried, I might take away their license. And, while that, sometimes is the case, there are so many things that we can check out and do before that becomes the situation. So there's blood tests, different things to look at, like your medications, which might actually improve your memory. So if you're worried, please see your healthcare provider. So the key takeaway is many symptoms of sarcopenia and dementia are very slow to progress. In fact, they're quite insidious, meaning they often sneak up on us, right? We lead such busy lives, so it's really easy to miss the signs that we're getting weaker. Maybe, carrying the same bag of groceries is becoming a little bit harder. But know your risk factors and try to be proactive. Again, as a family physician, what breaks my heart is to see an older, lady, for example, with brittle bones, osteoporosis, with cognitive impairment, who's too weak to get out of bed. Well, if we start, doing things like muscle or resistance or cognitive training in our 30s, 40s, and beyond, the goal and the dream is to prevent that scenario from becoming a reality. And I know we can do this. So let's find opportunities now of how to turn back time. So this is where I'll land a little bit of science on your lap, and specifically I'd like to thank Dr. Aaron Shellington and Dr. Lindsay Namagatsu from Western. They are research collaborators that I've had the pleasure of knowing, and they've really opened my mind as to this brain-muscle connection. So we know that both aerobic, things that get our heart rates pumping, and resistance training improve our brains, particularly executive function. Now, executive function is very important because it helps us make decisions, selecting choices, and controlling our emotions. So the example I like to give is driving. When we're driving, we have to make complex choices and decisions all the time. Going grocery shopping at a big grocery store involves a lot of executive function. So aerobic exercise and increases in biomarkers, specifically PDNF, help to improve brain plasticity. So allowing the brain to regenerate, grow, learn new topics and memories. And resistance exercise has really been shown to improve executive function in the cortex, both the frontal and temporal lobes. So, still the exact mechanisms, these neurocognitive scientists are still working out the exact mechanisms, but we know from studies that have trained older individuals for as little as 3 to 6 months that these changes are possible no matter where you are in your aging continuum. So, key takeaway number 3. Resistance exercise or strength training is excellent for your brain health. In fact, we get a 2-for-1 deal. We improve our strength, we reduce our risk of falls and loss of independence, so we're improving our function, and we may also be improving our cognitive abilities. And progressive strength training is ideal, right? So, start off slow, but try to become stronger and stronger, because exercise has a dose-response relationship, meaning the more you do, probably the more benefit you'll get. Now, you don't need to become a bodybuilder, right? That's not what we're talking about to get health benefits. But improving your amount of exercise is the key. And I really like to think of it as, there's no one, no matter what your age, that if they start to exercise, they won't improve. I've even helped 90-year-olds learn how to move their muscles and strength train, and they did benefit from it. And we can't say that about all medicines. Not all medicines, have an ability to impact how we feel. Now, Dr. Erin Shellington, she actually did her PhD on this work, and you can see the lady here, she's looking at a grid, and we taught older adults square stepping exercises. So in other words, we taught them different patterns of stepping on squares, and they had to memorize these patterns, and we call this mind motor exercise. So using your mind, so memory of remembering different squares while moving your body may be another amazing way to tap into that brain-body connection. So in her research, she actually showed that after 6 months of twice a week of square stepping exercise, that became progressively harder as the people did their exercise over 6 months, she actually saw improvements in that important executive functioning. So again, mind motor training. Variety is the spice of life. Try new hobbies or different ways of doing things, because it can really help your body and your mind for now and later. So example, try dancing or Zumba. Remember that song by Cher that she put out in 1989 that inspired this talk? Maybe after this talk, go find that song, turn it on, dance in your living room for 10 to 15 minutes. That's mind motor. Perhaps you try yoga, or try a new walking routine to incorporate mind motor exercise into your life. And remember that age is just a number. We actually care more about biological age, right? How are our cells and our muscles aging? You know, we want to keep those chromosomes and that DNA healthy. So how do we do that? Well, you know, we do that with activity and healthy nutrition. So this is an amazing lady. Her name is Joan. She actually has an Instagram account. I believe it's Train with Joan. And you can see here that she really did turn back time. So this is how she looked at 46, and with, you know, quite a serious training and effort, she was able to turn, you know, sort of flabby muscles into really strong muscles. And I want to make the point that even if you do strength training and your muscles don't look like this, it's okay. You know, the older we get, it is harder to get, you know, improvements in how our muscles look, but that doesn't mean our muscles aren't getting healthier. Remember, our muscles are involved with sending signals to the brain, managing our blood sugar. Those are all behind the scenes things our muscles are doing that we might not even see. But you know, in the description here I've put on the right, you know, we see that losing strength is inevitable as we age. You know, the world record for a single bench press record in a young man is 700 pounds. But, you know, the current world record for someone over 85 is actually 175 pounds. So while by no means do I encourage you to try that, you know, don't do this at home, nor do we even have to get to those extremes, but it shows that even with decline, we can still be amazingly strong. And I know that 175 pounds is definitely way more than I could bench press. So I think that's a testament to never get discouraged with aging. And again, it's never too late to turn back time. You know, this gentleman, he's going for a walk, but he's resistance training 2 times a week. So what he's not bedridden. He's still able to walk. You know, and there's a study that showed that 12 weeks of, you know, focused resistance training 3 times a week, actually 12 weeks reversed 12 years of muscle aging in older adults. So it's never too late. And again, you know, I'll highlight what Dr. Lin talked about, other factors to consider with turning back time. Sleep is important. Exercise, you know, is one pillar, but nutrition is the other pillar. So make sure you're getting enough protein. Talk to your physician about, you know, your protein goals, and they often increase as we age. Again, our muscles need more stimulus, more protein to build into strong muscles. And social connections. You know, go for a walk together with a friend. These are all great for the mind, body, and soul. So again, it's never too late to turn back time. Exercise is good at all stages. And take a minute now to ask yourself, in terms of strength or mind motor training, what could you do to improve your routine today? So finally, let's put everything we've learned into action. So again, these are the Canadian activity recommendations. So again, 150 minutes of moderately intense aerobic exercise spread over 3 or more days of the week. If you're inactive, start slow, go slow. Exercise snacks are amazing. So as little as 10 minutes a day can help improve your aerobic ability. And I'd really like to thank Dr. Diana Sherfali and Dr. Jane Thornton for terming these concepts of exercise snacks. Or perhaps just a really robust walking routine can also improve your cardiovascular health. And then in addition to aerobic, 2 to 3 times a week of resistance training, mind motor exercise, and reducing your sedentary activity. So getting up every 3 minutes, every 30 minutes or so. And we know that by doing this, we can reduce or impact the risk of most chronic diseases by 25 to 30%. So that's pretty major. So resistance 101. So There's many different ways to resistance train, right? The classic thing we think about is going into the gym, lifting heavy weights with barbells and, free weights and racks. And, that's one thing, machines at the gym. We can also use resistance bands. They have been shown to really improve strength as well, body weight, and then even gardening. You could even do body weight resistance band seated exercises. You could even use kitchen supplies if you are really in a pinch. So for example, the recommendation is 2 to 3 times a week to start with about 6 to 8 exercises in the repetition range of about 8 to 12 sets 1 to 3. So for example, you could start 2 times a week, 1 set of 6 exercises, progressively increasing once that becomes easy to doing a little more. So for example, I'll give you the really practical example. Let's say you're finding it difficult to get out of your chair. Well, even doing a squat out of the chair, so you're using your armrest to sort of push yourself up and then sitting back down in the chair and pushing yourself up. If you do that 10 or 20 times, you want to get to a point, if 1 is super easy and 10 is the hardest exercise you can imagine, you want to work to about a 6 or 7. So for you, that's 10 seated squat exercises. Well, if you do that 2 or 3 times a week, those 10 seated exercises might become easy. Well, what do you do next? Well, maybe you can stop using your chair rails and you can just use your body weight, right? So now you're doing 10 to 20 squats, not using the seat. If that becomes easy, well, now maybe you grab something from, a bag of potatoes and you hold that bag of potatoes while you do squats. And the key is to focus on compound exercises. We're all super busy, so these single arm exercises like bicep curls, if you don't have the time, I'd skip those and really focus on compound exercises that use a number of different muscles at once. Like squats are a great example, lunges, because they use so much, our major muscle mass is actually in our legs. So that's a great place to start. And if you've never strength trained before, consider getting some help, right? To make sure you're doing it right. And you could, see a physiotherapist, hire a personal trainer. There's also some great group activity classes online and in person. I've given some resources there. And while strength training may give you some muscle soreness initially, and that's okay, delayed onset muscle soreness or DOMS, it should never hurt. So, stop if it's hurting your joints or hurting you otherwise. And actually, we know that by doing exercise, in the end, it'll actually make your joints often feel better. And consider, of course, talking to your healthcare provider if you're looking to do more than light or moderate activity. If you're looking to get into that stronger range of activity, just make sure it's safe for you to do so. And, this is what I tell all of my patients, never hold your breath. You always want to breathe out when you do the hardest part of an exercise and breathe in while you're relaxing. And please don't fall. So if you need to use those arm rests, please do. So setting yourself up for success, goal setting is so important. If we just say, I'm going to resistance train, it's probably not going to happen. So let's say you set yourself the goal, if I'm increased in strength training, but I don't want to go to the gym. Fair enough. So I'd encourage you, to consider setting SMART goals. And Dr. Vallis will be speaking about goal setting and making our goals actually stick and work. But in essence, SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound goals. So I want you to be really specific in describing what exactly you're going to do, how will you measure success, make sure you have the time and the resources to do what you actually want to do, make sure it's achievable, and how will you know that you've been successful. All right, well, let's put into action these SMART goals with the goal, hypothetical goal that we've just set. So how would this look like? Well, if we're being specific, it might look like this. I will increase my strength training by incorporating exercise snacks once every few hours, so 10 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 times a day, using my body weight with the goal to increase my strength by 10 to 15 minutes per day. How will I measure this? Well, I'll write down and time my sessions and log it into my phone or a piece of paper to keep track of what I've done. And is this attainable? Yes, I actually like to feel strong. I understand why being strong is so important for me, and for someone in their 30s, 40s, no matter what your age, feeling strong is amazing. And I work from home, so I think I can take those screen breaks, and I'll do squats, wall push-ups, and lunges, and maybe some deadlifts using some heavy grocery bags. So, is this realistic? Well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get sore muscles while starting out, but that's okay. Actually those sore muscles are telling me that my muscles are adapting and they're getting stronger. So that's okay. I'm prepared. I know that's normal, and I'll, sort of start out with these snacks 1 or 2 times a day, every other day. I know that my weekends are busy, so I'm not even going to set myself up for failure, but I'm going to do this, during the week while I'm working. And I'll also know that I'm getting the added benefit. We know that, doing exercise just makes us cognitively sharper and better at work, so that's win-win. And in terms of time, I'm going to give myself a 4-week or 4-week time goal to see how I'm doing. And if I'm meeting my goals, if I'm not, that's okay. I'll just have to figure out, how can I meet the goals that I'm setting for myself. So, this is important key takeaway number 6. Setting SMART goals is so important, but don't get discouraged by setbacks. Instead, rather plan for them. And this concept of setbacks is an important one. Life is not a smooth trajectory. There are going to be bumps in the road. Maybe we get sick. Maybe the weather's awful. Maybe we're even hospitalized. And as I tell my patients, it's not if, but when these setbacks will happen. So the important thing is not to get discouraged and to rather plan for them and get back on track. And on the topic of setbacks, I really encourage this concept of banking muscle. We all get sick, and we know that, let's say if we're in hospital for a few days and lying in bed, our muscles will atrophy or lose strength quite rapidly. But if we bank strength, if we have that muscle power, we can lose a little bit, and we don't, have that progressive slip into, becoming bedridden or functionally dependent. So banking muscles, planning for setbacks is really important. So motivation, also is tricky business, right? And it's difficult to be motivated to act today for a potential outcome far into the future. That's true. And if you'd like to read a little bit more about this topic, this was the book that inspired Dr. Pandey. It's a light read. Another really great book that I've read is called Spark, that looks at brain health and cognition and the power of exercise or movement. Even with strength training and any type of exercise, as I mentioned, we all respond to it. So in as little as 12 weeks, if you do it consistently, and the key is, try to, start slow, but if you feel yourself getting stronger, don't just settle, don't just plateau. find ways to get stronger, right? So maybe you've done those home exercises using things you found in the kitchen, but now you're feeling more confident. Maybe now's the time you hire someone or you go to the gym to, increase that load. That keeps it fresh. We don't get bored. And this is the really other important key takeaway. You've got to find things you love to do. So if it's gardening to work your muscles, that's amazing. If you like to go to the gym and track your strength gains like Joan does, well, that's awesome too. But find things you enjoy doing. Otherwise, it becomes a chore and a burden. So while strength training is like medicine and we need to take our medicine, we should also have a little bit of fun while taking this medicine. So here is the summary of my key takeaway from today's presentation. So number one, it's a little depressing, but our peak development really peaks at around age 30, an average healthy individual. But that isn't all doom and gloom. We know that while we age and the amazing things that come with age, wisdom and knowledge, we do have to work a little bit harder to make sure that our muscles don't decline. And we also have to work at our brain health. And the brain and muscles are so interconnected and related. In fact, they talk to each other all day long. So know the symptoms of sarcopenia or muscle loss and dementia. They can be very slow to progress, very sneaky, making them hard often to detect. So know your risk factors and be on the lookout for decline. So what are we going to do about it? Resistance or strength training is excellent for your brain health. We get a 2-for-1 deal: increased strength, reduced risk of falls, and reduced loss of independence, and we hopefully will maintain or improve our cognitive function. Variety is the spice of life, right? Remember that mind motor training I spoke about? Try new hobbies that keep you active, or find ways of doing things that can help your body and your mind for now and for later. And it's never too late to start. Exercise is good at all stages of life. Research has shown we can still improve into our 80s and beyond. And even a little bit of exercise goes a long way, but if you can push yourself and continue to progress, that's even better. If you're worried about your health and worried about perhaps is strength training or exercise training safe for me, check in with your healthcare professional. It's always a good idea to check in, and while mild or moderate exercise, there's very little harm or risk, so I don't want to get you worried. But if you have other medical conditions like diabetes or uncontrolled high blood pressure, you do want to get those under control first before you start a more vigorous exercise training. And remember those SMART goals. Goals can help, but don't get discouraged by setbacks. Rather, plan for them. Find things you're doing, otherwise you're not likely to do them. And finally, while mental and physical aging is inevitable, it can be delayed or slowed down. So with that, thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Thank you to Dr. Pandey for organizing this amazing session. And if you haven't already done so, maybe take a moment now, take a listen to Cher, and dance around your living room. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reichert, for your expert insights.
It's impacted me in a negative way a little because I was very scared, had young kids. But in many ways, it's given me positive things to become a stronger person and learn to cope with life and help the kids realize how important it is for them to take care of their health. So now when I meet a few friends who say that they have this problem, then I'm able to help them in a way to make them go and see the doctors at the right time, get the right help. It's kind of been I would say more positive than negative.
I think we can all take a wellness break at this point. Let's get up and stretch and put into action the motivation we got from our previous speakers. Cindy, please come back up and teach us as our wellness coach how we can exercise safely and effectively at home.
We're gonna do some stretches today. Make sure you're sitting nice and tall. Move yourself forward on the chair a little bit and keep those abdominals engaged. Roll the shoulders back. We want to make sure you're looking good in posture and feeling nice and strong. The first one we're going to do is hamstrings. Step that foot forward or extend the leg out front. Pull the toes up. Feel a nice long stretch through the back of the leg. Good. Now tip yourself forward just a little bit from the hips, and I want you to feel a little extra stretch through the back of the leg. Good. We're going to hold our stretches 10 to 15 seconds. If it's feeling a little uncomfortable, you can back off a little bit, sit up nice and tall. If you can do a little bit more stretching, tip yourself forward a little bit more. Great, looking good. Okay, relax that leg. Bring it back to the neutral position, what we're in. Lift the other leg or step it forward. Straighten out the leg. A little softness through the knee. We don't want to lock out. Tip yourself forward again. Pull the toes up towards your body. You're feeling that stretch through the back of the leg. How are we doing, everyone? Feeling good at home? Good stuff. Good, and hold that stretch. Remember, you can back off if it's too much, and then relax again. Good, back to neutral position, nice and tall. Abs are locked in. Take one leg forward. This time I want you to lift and hold the leg so we can do a little bit of ankle circles. That's it. Roll one way, whatever you're comfortable with, then roll the other way. Stretching out those ankles a little bit. Good stuff. Relax that leg. Nice and tall again, abs are tight. Stretch out the other leg. Ankle circles one direction, whatever you're comfortable with, and then the other way. Good work, everyone. And back to that neutral position. Shoulder roll back. I want to make sure everyone's sitting nice and tall. Engage those abdominals. That means you've got to pull the belly button in toward the spine. So you're activating all those abdominal muscles and keeping the spine nice and aligned. Good work. Shoulder roll back. We want to make sure that we're opening up the chest here a little bit. Good, relaxing through the upper body. That's it, good. And shoulders down and back. Now, if you're on the couch, you might not have space to do this. So again, shift yourself forward in the chair so that you're nice and tall. Lean to one side. I want to feel the stretch through the side of the body. Good, opening up and then back to neutral position and lean to the other side. Nice and strong, keep the abdominals tucked in. Pull the chin in so we're opening up through the chest a little bit. Good, and back to center. Roll the shoulders back, neutral position. Take one arm across the body. We want to open up through the shoulders and in through the back a little bit. Again, nice and tall. Good, take some deep breaths. And relax. Good, tuck that arm in a little bit closer. You got it, and relax. Shoulder back, we're going to do the other side. Reach the arm across the body. Tuck it in, give that arm a little pull. If you can't hold on to the upper arm, it's okay. Tuck it in a little closer, lower. You got it. Good, and relax. Shoulder roll here. Open up the body. Tip the chin forward. We want to stretch out the back of the neck here a little bit. Pull the chin in towards the chest and feel the stretch through the back of the neck. Good, relax. Bring it back to neutral position. Tuck the chin in. Ear to shoulder this time, stretching out the opposite side of the neck. Make sure you drop the shoulder down nice and tall. Activate those abdominals. Good, hold where it's comfortable. If you need to let off a little bit, that's okay. You really want to feel the stretch through the side of the neck into the shoulder. Bring your head back to neutral position. Good, this should be comfortable for you. Tip the ear to the other shoulder. Dropping it down, feeling a stretch again through the other side of the neck and shoulder. Good. And back to center. Neutral position. Roll those shoulders back. We're going to get into the upper back now. Take those hands out front. Interlock the fingers if you want to. And roll the shoulders forward. Drop the chin again. So we're feeling a nice stretch through the upper back and shoulders. Looking good at home, team. Good. Thanks for working with me this morning. and relax. Good, shoulder roll back. Now we're gonna open up the chest a little bit here. So take those hands behind the body, interlock the fingers again, roll the shoulders down and back. You wanna open up the chest a little bit here, stretching through that upper body. If you can't interlace the fingers behind you, it's okay. Grab the cushion behind you or the chair that you're sitting on so that you're opening up the chest and reaching those arms behind. A little bit of a variation is fine. We're just looking at opening up that upper body. Great work, team. Relax again. I need you to do that shoulder roll to relax those muscles. Good. Again, we're working through the side. I want you to lift the arm up. You got it. Reach for the ceiling. Reach those hands up. Stretching through the side, in through the shoulder. Good. Feeling really comfortable here at home. And then relax back down. Let's do the other side. Shoulders back, nice and tall. Reach that arm up. Reach for the ceiling. Reach those fingertips up. Looking good, team. Okay, last little second here, and then relax. Good. Shoulder roll back. We want to keep that body nice and relaxed and open. Good. Thanks for joining me.
I'm feeling so much more motivated and positive about moving forward with the changes I need to make. Aren't you? Have you written down any of those SMART goals yet? Remember, this day is about action. We need to set goals that we are going to implement.
If someone suddenly collapses and doesn't respond when you touch or speak to them, if they aren't breathing or are making strange gasping sounds, they might be having a cardiac arrest. With 3 simple steps, you could help save a life. Don't hesitate. Every second counts. First, call 911 or ask someone to call for you. If there are people around, shout for someone to bring you a defibrillator AED. Next, start CPR immediately. You can do this. Put one hand on top of your other hand and push hard and fast in the center of the chest. Push about 100 to 120 times per minute to the beat of Staying Alive. Keep your elbows locked and push hard. Keep going until someone else takes over. If someone brings you an AED, use it as soon as possible. It's easy. Turn it on and follow the voice prompts. Don't worry, the AED will tell you what to do and won't hurt you or the person. The 911 dispatcher can coach you through all of the steps. You can save someone's life using your phone, your hands, and an AED. Don't hesitate. You can't hurt. You can only help. heartandstroke.ca/CPR.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our next speaker, Dr. Michael Vallis, a registered health psychologist practicing in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I am proud to say that he is an associate professor in medicine at Dalhousie University, my alma mater in Halifax. His main area of expertise is in diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular risk. He is an active researcher on motivation, behavioral change, and psychosocial adaptation to chronic diseases. He consults nationally and internationally and was awarded the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal by the Government of Canada for his work. With great honor and pleasure, I ask Michael to address us today on strategies to make long-term change, behavioral changes to improve our heart health. Michael.
Hi there. My name is Dr. Michael Vallis, and I'm a health psychologist at Dalhousie University. And my area of focus is on behavior change and in motivation. And what I'd like to do is offer you a brief presentation on how you can establish and then maintain healthier lifestyle behaviors in a way that is more engaging and more positive. So, key habits for a healthier, happier life. I think we need to start and ask some basic questions. How long does it take a new habit to form? And if you think about New Year's resolutions or many seasonal changes that people choose to make, we often think about 2 to 3 to 4 weeks for a habit to be established and to form. Now that's good news. The context and the challenge is when we think about how long does it take for a new habit to become sustained. This is what we would call a lifestyle behavior, When we talk about people who have healthy lifestyles, we're talking about not people who work hard to resist temptations in order to choose the healthy behavior, but we're actually talking about people who want to do the healthy behavior, are drawn towards the healthy behavior. It's become part of who they are. It's become part of what makes their life worthwhile. And we know the following: the more work a person unwillingly does to manage their health, the lower their quality of life. The more work a person willingly does to change their behavior, the higher their quality of life. So it's not so much the behavior as to how it is connected to what's important to you and to how you are motivated to maintain those changes. And so in this session today, you're going to hear some really interesting strategies for changing behavior, and I'd like to talk about how we can make these stick. Now, the primary question that we get, and as a behavioral psychologist, this is a question that we hear all the time, and you see this in the literature, the public literature, the press. People are asking, what should I do to change? And so the focus is really on the what. Should I do the ketogenic diet or the intermittent fasting? Should I just walk more or do high-intensity interval training? Do I do yoga? Do I meditation? And we all are aware of these strategies and these behaviors that people do, and we think, oh, maybe I should be doing that. And so there tends to be a focus on the what. What should I do? And what I'd like to really emphasize to you is actually the what is less important. What's more important than what you do is actually why you do it and how you do it. And that's what I want to answer in this brief presentation, is how do we shift the focus from, I was trying to follow the rules of the ketogenic diet and then I struggled, to this is what's important to me and this is how I figured out how I can make it fit in my life. I like to view behavior change as having two aspects to it. It's kind of like, we have the getting started to get to the pinnacle, to get to change, to make it happen. But what's really important to understand about behavior change is that the work required to get the change happening, the habit, is not the same as keeping the change going. So once you've been successful at achieving your goals, now those goal behaviors have to be consistent then over time. And it's the staying there that I hope I can shed some light on and add to my colleagues' presentations for this session today. Many people kind of look at change and they think, okay, you work hard and you get success. So there's this tend to be this expectation that, it's like a straight line. And of course, the reality is on the bottom, right? That success is possible, but not without encountering problems, setbacks, failures, challenges, obstacles. That this is normal human behavior. And so it's really important for us to reflect that, because one of the things that I've learned from a psychology perspective is that the strongest predictor of success is actually not giving up. And so what I hope you can do is establish a pathway to success that allows you to continue even in the face of barriers. And it's also fair to say that without a plan, you might actually struggle to stay changed. And the reason that you would struggle is because you're normal, you're human, and health behavior change is actually not easy. Speaking of being human, let me briefly talk about the behavioral control systems of the brain. So in the brain, how is our behavior organized? The motivations that we have for our behavior, the behavioral choices that we make. And what's very interesting about the human condition is we actually have two different systems. And so there's literally two behavior control systems in the brain. One of them is in your frontal lobes, just behind your forehead. We call these the frontal lobes. This is what's called the executive system of the brain. This is the logical brain. And this is a recent part of the brain. This is really where humans differ from other animals so primarily. Where we share with many other species is the emotional system, the feeling centers. So you can see on the slide here, you've got this kind of what I feel like doing and what I know I should do. So your heart and your head sometimes aren't lined up. As a matter of fact, we would suggest that most of the time, especially in our current environment, they are not lined up. Let me explain. When we understand basic human behavior, the basic human behavior, we are actually hardwired. These are basic brain processes. So that hedonic system that you see on the right, that's subcortical. So we're not even aware. That happens in the non-conscious brain. And that part of the brain is hardwired to pursue pleasure, to minimize effort, and to make the choice with the most immediate positive consequences. Because that's where human survival really came from. The challenge, of course, is in the societies that we live, it's really challenging. And do you know, as you see here, sugar can be more addictive than cocaine. And so when you think about how much high fructose corn syrup is, put into products, how much sugar is added to food choices, it's no wonder we struggle, because in fact our hard wiring would take us toward those. And so in a way, you think about this, the logical system is useful, but requires a lot of energy. The emotional system is automatic and powerful. And so this is why we know that, in fact, the feelings dominate. And that's why it's important to manage your feelings, because behavior change, it's like surfing. You always have to focus on your balance, keeping your balance when you're surfing. And behavior change is like that. It's not an easy road. It's not a straight slide downhill. It, in fact, is filled with problems and with challenges. And so what this allows us to really conclude, if we think about how do people operate, what are some of the sort of the psychology of behavior, I think it's important to anchor in our current society, healthy behavior is abnormal, because when we're guided by pleasure, convenience, and immediate consequences, it takes us towards the unhealthy behaviors and therefore the health consequences of that. Avoidance is actually the most common coping strategy. So if you feel like you're struggling, it's probably because you're normal. So these are important beginnings. People don't follow recommendations, they follow their own beliefs. So it's really important for you to be honest with yourself, to reflect on what's important to you and what your attitudes and beliefs are, because they can be worked with to promote behavior change. And as I've just described, the emotions dominate logic. And a lot of the care that you receive for your health is based on the relationship. Your healthcare provider is there to support you in this journey towards change. Why is healthy behavior so uncommon? And it's easily to understand when we think about the environment in which we live. And so just when we think about obesity and the food environment, what you see is that the poor brain is just inundated with all of this food choices, almost all of which are unhealthy. Time is a major problem in our current societies. We have to commute long distances, so we're sedentary. We have the convenience of drive-thrus. We then have all of these tempting foods, which of course has a huge impact on our general lifestyle, but tends to take us toward being sedentary and making poor choices. So health is really about kind of putting the brakes on all of this magnet pull towards the unhealthy choice. And so the answer to the question is something I'd like you to reflect on, that healthy behavior is abnormal, and therefore we need to focus on strategies for promoting behavior change. I like to ask this question, what is motivation? Because I think it's worth reflecting on. Because, is it really, really wanting something? I really want this. So is that motivation? Some of us might say, yeah, exactly. I really want to manage my weight. I really want to get my blood pressure under control. I really want to. But I would say to you that that's not really what motivation is. And the reason for that is because of what I had already said, that really wanting something will get you started, but it won't necessarily keep you going. And so we want to help people develop motivation for sustained behavior change over time. So wanting is great, but what truly is motivation? And I can show you that in an image. This is motivation. Motivation is having personal, meaningful reasons to overcome the barriers to the behavior. So this person really wants to get somewhere because it is not an easy journey in these conditions that this person faces. But true motivation isn't wanting to be at the end. True motivation is wanting to do the work to get there, knowing that there can be hard work of change. And so this one is important to reflect on it. So as you might anticipate, I'm going to ask you to think about what are your personal, meaningful reasons to do the behaviors that you would want to do in order to achieve your goals. Maintaining motivation is critically important. And here's where it ties directly into self-esteem, how you see yourself. So as you take on a new behavior, we really are encouraging you to personalize it, to make it yours. Because if that behavior is part of how you see yourself, so if I say to you, hello, I'm Michael, I'm a runner. Well, what am I telling you? I'm telling you what I do, I guess, but I'm also telling you who I am, that my identity is tied up into running. And I still use that word, I'm a runner, even though my running is less and less because of my age and stage and physical health. And so it's important to understand the self-esteem aspect, because if the health behavior becomes part of your identity, you'll protect it. If it's not part of your identity, it'll always be hard work. And so kind of learn to like the new you. What I'm really saying here is that we need to have our why, the reason to do the work of change, because goals come and go, but human values never get tired. And so I'm introducing a concept here, not so much around the goal behavior, but around how does that take you to be a better person? How does that make your life more worthwhile? Because if you ask yourselves the question, when is it okay for an honest person to become dishonest? Well, they don't really, because it's who they are. So their behavior over time is very much consistent with their values, what's important to them. And when do caring people stop caring? Well, they don't. They continue to care. And so I hope you can see here that what we're asking you to do is not just say, my goal is to walk 30 minutes a day, 4 days a week. My goal is. The question is also to think about, how does that make your life better? How does that take you closer to the person that you would really like to be? Because of values-based goals are much more likely to be achieved and maintained. And I can just quickly illustrate to you the importance of values-driven behavior. This is a fun little exercise. We call it the cookie example. It's quite easy. I want you to imagine, you can have one of these two cookies that you see on the screen. You can have this fresh, warm, aromatic cookie baked on the left, or you could have that slightly burnt 2-day-old cookie on the right. Which cookie do you want? Now that's a no-brainer, because we look at this and we think about taste, we think about pleasure, we think about that sugar and cocaine kind of pleasure-based decision. And which is going to give us the more pleasure? The cookie on the left. But now here's the punchline. Your 3-year-old granddaughter came up with the idea to make those cookies on the right for you. She worked really hard to make that cookie and insisted that your son bring it to you so it arrived in time for your dinner tonight. Now which cookie do you want? And have you noticed how it shifts? All of a sudden it's not about pleasure, it's about meaning. It's not about which tastes best, it's which is more meaningful, which is more value to you. And given the fact that you're connected to your granddaughter, given that she gave you this gift, albeit burnt and old, nonetheless, your 3-year-old worked on these cookies. So could you imagine how guilty you'd feel throwing those cookies in the garbage and eating the cookie on the left? There is the example of values-driven behavior. So as you go forward, think about what's important to you and how any of the behaviors you want to take on to improve your health actually improve your life, help you feel like a more satisfied person. We come back to this expectation versus reality, because it's really important that we figure out, how do we manage the problems, the setbacks, the failures, the challenges, the obstacles. The chances that you can put in the work and be successful, make a change, and it will last for the next 3 or 4 or 5 decades is not very great. And this is important because when we set up our expectations, because of those bumps and obstacles that we encounter, many people struggle. They set these expectations. I'm going to exercise X number of times a week. I'm going to eat in this fashion. And then they experience this problem of running into barriers. And sometimes what happens is I try and I fail. I try and I fail. I try and I fail. And what happens? I stop trying. I actually give up. If my efforts don't produce an outcome, I'll give up. And this is a phenomenon called learned helplessness. It's almost like a state of depression where the person has said, I've tried and I can't do this. So it has to be, this is why we believe that realistic and achievable goals are so important. And so when you think about the smart and smarter goals, this is why they are so important, because we want to be able to maintain some control over those. Learned helplessness is actually a really important issue to address because it's very much associated with our health. When expectations aren't realized, that is, we have hopes, they don't always come true, then we have to try to manage these issues. And I want to show you how we can do that. I want to show you how we can manage learned helplessness, how we can promote positivism, restraint. And I'm going to talk first about some of behavioral strategy to go from learned helplessness to learned optimism. That is, how can you organize your behavior to increase the likelihood of success and to reduce this idea of I try and I fail, I try and I fail, I'm just going to give up. This is an important psychological concept. It's called self-efficacy, which is your confidence in your ability to do the behavior in the face of barriers. Think back to that picture of that woman walking through the snowstorm. She was motivated, right? It's that self-efficacy. I'm going to get there. I know I can get there. It's not going to be easy, but I know I can do it. And so self-efficacy is a very important psychological state. And it's based on your, what we call an active mastery. It's based on your ability to actually have success. And as you see here, people with a strong sense of self-efficacy, they view challenges as problems to be mastered. They have a stronger sense of commitment to their interests and activities, and they recover quickly. This is resilience is also associated with that. Of course, those with weak sense of self-efficacy, they avoid. They think that the tasks are beyond their ability to cope, and they focus on failures. They lose confidence in themselves. So this concept is actually quite relevant to the psychological experience of quality of life. And behavior shaping, if we think about the SMART goals that you've identified and that we've just heard about, if we sequence SMART goals so that each goal is doable and worthwhile, so each goal is just the next step forward. So it's not too big that it's overwhelming or difficult to do, but it's worth doing. And if you sequence those, so you can see what's happening here on the screen, success followed by success, followed by success, followed by success, followed by success. If you can organize your behavior, it turns out it's more important to have consecutive or successive success experiences. So that it's not the size of the goal, it's actually the repeating of successful goal attainment that's associated with self-efficacy. Somewhere between the 5th and the 7th consecutive success experience, the person develops self-efficacy. And it's not, just hope. It's based on their experience. If I did those at last 5 and 6, and the next 5 and 6 are kind of similar to the ones before, I'll break them down into small enough that I can do it, but big enough to be worthwhile. Remember, we live in a society that can be characterized as go big or go home. And so we tend to take big goals, big goals, big goals. And I'm suggesting to you the opposite. Small successive goals allows for this behavior shaping, which is associated with self-efficacy, which is an antidote to learned helplessness. Our behavior is tremendously influenced by the environment. And so if we sit down with a plate of pizza to watch TV versus we're having a social meal, it'll change how we eat. If we open our cupboards and we see the pictures in the middle, that changes your behavior. If you're hanging around with smokers, what are you going to do? If you're hanging around with joggers, what are you going to do? And so stimulus control is about sort of altering the environment so that we can identify ways of limiting our behavior. And, look at the example here. How expensive is junk food at a movie theater? And it's incredible how much we're willing to pay. We don't even think about it. We just do it automatically. The price of a ticket might be $11 and $12 or $15, but it costs $35 or $40 to go to the movies. Why? You're spending $25 on junk food. Why? Because it's just been it's a habit. It's Pavlov's dog. So if we change the environment, so if you like to eat potato chips, let me make you healthier in your potato chip consumption. Eat all the chips you want, anytime you want. Just follow the following stimulus control rules. Number 1, don't bring potato chips into your house. If you want chips, go out and eat them. But you have to be outside when you do it. Not so much fun anymore, is it? Second is you can never buy more than one bag at a time, and it can never be greater than 75 grams. So if you go home tonight and open up a 300-gram bag of potato chips when you're watching TV, you're going to mindlessly eat most of those or all of those chips. If you follow the stimulus control rules and you decide tonight that you want to have chips, you have to turn off the TV, get in your car, drive to a store, eat it. You're never going to eat 300 grams of potato chips when you have to buy them in bags of 75 grams because you have to go back into the store 4 times to make that happen. So I think you can see you're altering the environment to make it easier to stay on track. So you look for triggers and then you try to alter that. It requires a lot of kind of creative solutions from the individuals. Think about how you could alter, if you want to walk at the end of the day, let's say between work ending and dinner happening, well, you may have a choice between going home and then trying to do your walk when you're dealing with your kids and your partners, or you could walk from work for those 15 or 20 minutes before you get in your car and drive home. Turns out to be a lot easier. There's fewer distractions, more reasons to walk when you're in your work environment than it would be when you're in your home environment. And also when it comes to changing behavior when you work with your goals, we like to use the strategy of what we call reinforcement management, which is set a goal, get a reward, set a goal, get a reward. It can take a long time for behavior to become really habitual and part of a person's lifestyle. And so if you have goals like, if you could achieve, let's say, a physical activity goal or a healthy eating goal, maybe you'll download a book you want, or you'll watch a movie that you want to watch. And so you set up this kind of contingency where you're getting a positive reward for the effort that you put into it. And that helps you in sustaining the behavior long enough for it to become ingrained and really part of how you would choose to operate. From learned helplessness to learned optimism. And so this one is really about positivism. And in psychology, we've obviously been concerned about psychological problems and challenges, but it's also really important to talk about the positive aspects of life and how positivism can be actually behavioral. And there are, as you see on the screen here, happiness interventions, things that you can do that can actually be associated with improving your mood, like regularly setting aside time to recall moments of gratitude, thinking positively about yourself, actually being your own friend, practicing kindness. If you want to boost your mood, a random act of kindness towards another person is a surefire way to make yourself feel better. Affirming your values. Now we're back to values again. And if you're working hard in the service of your values, that is going to be associated with positive outcomes. And recognizing that life is about ups and downs. When you have positive experiences, no, they may not last, but if we savor the positive, we are much more able to boost our mood and maintain an optimistic view. I'm sure you've all seen this, the serenity prayer, to accept the things you cannot change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I use that slide as an introduction to the basic of what's called cognitive behavior therapy, which tells us that the way we think actually has an impact. And so I'm not doing very good job with this, so why bother? A thought like that will impact your behavior. And those feelings create behavior that reinforce the thoughts, and around and around and around you go. And so when we think about all of these thoughts that might interfere with a person's ability to achieve their goals, it's really important to recognize that those thoughts come from that sort of emotional system, that limbic system that I talked about at the very beginning. They're kind of automatic. They just pop into your mind. And the essence of cognitive therapy is basically, as you see on the screen, you don't have to believe everything that you think. You can take a perspective and look at your thoughts. We call this cognitive reframing. So you might want to identify, what's the negative thought? What's the kind of interfering thought that you might have? The thing that might be associated with taking you away from the health behavior. And so you do your best you capture that in its natural words, including the emotional weight. You then reflect on how actually it makes sense. When you think that way, it's going to influence your attitudes and your behaviors. And then you kind of reflect on that sort of connection, right? That one taps into the other. And this allows you to introduce the idea that, hey, maybe I can have a coping response here. Maybe I can think about this differently. And so when it comes to food choices, obesity, weight management, et cetera, we see a lot of people struggle with the sort of drive to eat. And let's take a look at that. You have a natural impulse, let's say, that's triggered by cues in the environment. You go to the movie theater and you just have an impulse, a craving for junk food. That creates the wanting. That might create this permission thought, oh, you know what, I've had a hard day. I can have just a little overeating episode. That increases your wanting, reduces your restraint, and actually is negative. If we sort of pull in the reframing piece, if we identify those permission thoughts and we say, hang on a second, I don't have to believe everything I think, then you actually may develop on this reframing towards the restraint thoughts. I can stop at any moment, right? Your next choice can be healthier than your past choice. You can always make your next choice healthy. This is a choice, this is an option you always have. And you can see it leads to a very, very different outcome. So you might want to think a bit about using that sort of that cognitive, that thought muscle. And in the same way that we can build physical strength, we can build cognitive strength. Kind of wrapping this up here, why do you want to change, right? What is your reason, your why, your personal meaningful reasons? Think of the barriers. Have a plan to deal with those barriers. And who are the people that will help you? The steps to success are as follows. So many people think, again, I'll go back to that beginning part. What should I be doing? What should I be doing? And what I would say is that I don't really think we should be telling you what to do. What we should be saying is here's all kinds of things you can do. And when you consider something, when you consider a behavior, rather than think, is this the right thing to do? I think there are 3 questions that could be more likely to help you. And those questions are, am I interested in doing it? Like, do I have a desire to do that? Just because someone else did it. Maybe it's not for you. You have to personalize this because change is hard. When you do it, are you glad you did? And when you do it, do you want to do it again? So that's the sort of experiential part of success. So try to organize your behaviors so that they allow you to think like, I'd like to do that, and I'm glad I did, and I want to do it again, because that taps into the psychological concepts that we see to be so strongly predictive of change. And those psychological concepts are adherence, finding the behavior that you can stick to. And I feel very strongly about this, that one behavior is not good or bad. One behavior isn't for everyone. We all have to find those behaviors that we can do. We all have our own personalities, our own culture, our own backgrounds. And so what is it that you can do? Then how do you build self-efficacy, that confidence in overcoming barriers, and intrinsic motivation, that values-based goals? Finally, when you're dealing with other people, it's important to kind of identify who's there to support you and who may be less willing to support you. And keep your friends close. It's not a popularity contest. It's more important that you kind of connect to people who you feel comfortable with, who support you in your behavior. And then there's some communication strategies. Broken record technique, the art of fogging. What is that? Broken record. Find something that you need to say to a person. So let someone say, oh, don't worry about your exercise today, or, oh, don't worry about your diet today. You can have this. You might want to think of a way of responding to that. And then you say the same thing over and over and over. You might say something, well, yeah, but I would like to stick to my diet. Yes, but I would like to stick to my diet. Yes, but no matter what the person says, you repeat it over and over. What you'll find is that the other person will run out of gas long before you do. And the art of fogging is agreeing without agreeing. And what I mean by that is like someone says, oh, you know what, you've been working really hard lately, you deserve this. You might say, well, yes, I can see why you would say that, but this is important for me to continue to do. So you're not agreeing, but you're also not getting into a tense argument that would cause you perhaps to cave in. And so as we wrap this presentation up, I just want you to, again, to come back to that kind of what is it that you can control and what can you not control? So here we are in the middle of this sort of crazy US, Canada, US, the world. There's a lot of stress there that we're all being subjected to. And you don't have to catch all your balls that get thrown at you. So what can you control? Focus in on that and let other things go. Okay, so to summarize my presentation, many of us would say, well, tell me what to do. And what I want to say is, yeah, you need to make it yours. It's got to fit you. So don't be shy to personalize your goals so that they fit who you are as a person. Many of us think, oh, I need to get this outcome. I need to get this outcome. You can't actually control the outcome. You can control the effort. And if you find what's personally meaningful to you, what's consistent with your values, then you should expect that your efforts will take you closer to your values. We often talk about, wanting to do well. And in our society, we tend to use as role models people who excel at things. Those are called mastery models. Actually, the coping models are the more helpful models. Let me show you this. This is from a very well-established theory called the social learning theory. People who win marathons are not good role models for someone who wants to become active. the role model shouldn't be this mastery model, this person finishing a marathon in under 2 hours and 8 minutes. It's on the right. It's these people just out kind of jogging along, right? This is what we should aspire to. So coping models, not mastery models. We set expectations. We want to achieve it. But what's more important than expectations is the satisfaction with the progress that we made. Because life kind of throws us a bit of a wrenches, and we have to figure out how to be satisfied with what we have. You might want to think about life is not about having what you want, it's wanting what you have. And if you can make that shift, satisfaction is better than expectations. When you run into setbacks, try to think about them as opportunities for learning, ways of helping us become better and better. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I hope that this has been useful.
Thank you, Dr. Vallis. Wow, what a rich source of information. I've learned so much today from him. So, to the audience, what SMART goals did you set? There was a lot that you could have set from Dr. Vallis's presentation. This is a day of action. Let's start setting those SMART goals that you're going to implement.
A simple device can help save a life. Know how to use it. A defibrillator, or AED, is a small device that's simple to use and could save a life. When the AED arrives, don't waste a second. If it doesn't turn on automatically, push the power button. A voice prompt will tell you exactly what you need to do step by step. There are also pictures to help guide you. Remove the 2 pads that are attached to the AED. They look like stickers with wires. Pictures on the pads show you where to place them. Peel off the backing and stick the pads directly on the person's skin. Listen to the voice prompts. If a shock is needed, the AED will count down and deliver the shock automatically, or it may tell you to push a button. Keep listening to the voice. It will tell you what to do. Stay with the person. If they start to move or try to get up, keep them calm and at rest until medical help arrives. You can save someone's life using your phone, your hands, and an AED. Don't hesitate. You can't hurt. You can only help. heartandstroke.ca/CPR.
We're going to work through a little bit of meditation. I'd like you to join me in relaxing the body and feeling very calm through this session. It will only take a couple of minutes. I also invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. I'm going to start with my eyes closed just to encourage you to feel comfortable in this position. If you're sitting on the couch or in a chair, I would like you to lean back so you've got some support through the upper body. Your feet can be relaxed out front, touching the floor, or they can be extended in a lying position if you're more comfortable. But I do encourage you to take some time to relax and feel comfortable in this position. Here we go. Inhale through the nose and exhale. Letting your body sink deeper into the chair, into the couch, whatever you're sitting on right now. Try and let your body sink deeper into the position where you want to relax. Again, I invite you to close your eyes. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Start to move the thoughts out of your head. Bring new thoughts in, that you're calm, relaxed, and be patient with yourself. If thoughts come into your mind, I need to wash the dishes, let it go. Let those thoughts leave your mind. And in place of that, think about relaxing the body. Focus on you for just a few minutes. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Relax the shoulders down. Sink them deeper into the chair behind you so that your shoulders are feeling one with the couch. Let your body feel what's behind it. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Start thinking about your body in its relaxed position. Very calm, very relaxed. Squeeze your eyes shut. Close, close, close. Squeeze them tighter, and then release. Let the eyes relax. Let your face relax. Work your way through your cheeks, and now squeeze your lips together. And release. Letting all the tension relax from your face. Let it dissipate from your body, and the feelings of calmness and relaxation coming over your muscles. Work your way down your neck, in through your shoulders. Lift your shoulders up towards your ears. Crunch up the muscles, make them work a little bit, and then relax the shoulders down. Letting the shoulder muscles relax, feeling very calm. Let all the tension leave your body. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Letting this time come to you, relaxation, feeling very calm. Work your way through your arms, into your elbows, forearms, wrists, and hands. Give your hands a little squeeze, make little fists, activate the muscles, and then release. Let all the tension leave your fingers and dissipate from your body. Relaxing your mind, relaxing the muscles, letting your body sink deeper into the chair. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Let's work through the hips. Think about where your body's positioned. Maybe you need to sink deeper into your seat, moving yourself just slightly so that you can relax the muscles. Work your way through your legs, quadriceps. Extend both legs out for me. Squeeze the quadricep muscles, create some resistance and some tension, and then relax the muscles. Let all the tension leave your body. Let the tension escape through your fingertips and your tippy toes, relaxing your body. Inhale through the nose, out through the mouth. Work your way through your knees and down into your calves. This time, extend your legs, point your toes, point, 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 point. Activate the muscles and then release. Let all the tension leave your body. Let it escape through the toes, relaxing, feeling very calm. Extend your legs one more time. Pull the toes up towards your face. Let the muscles squeeze through your body and then release. Letting all the tension escape through the tippy toes, out of your body, and sink deeper into the chair, deeper into the couch, relaxing. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, letting yourself sink deeper into the chair. Take a minute now just to relax. Let all the thoughts leave your body, all the tension leave your body. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. I would invite you now to open your eyes. Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. Good. Take a minute to just come back into yourself, move your legs around, roll your shoulders, and one more nice deep breath. Inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you everyone for joining me for my presentation today entitled Lifestyle Medicine, The Power of Healthy Habits. As you may remember earlier when I spoke, I showed you the left side of this picture, showing that we have made enormous progress in the last 30 years on our fight against heart disease, still the #1 killer across the planet. But since the 80s, we've seen a dramatic drop in the number of deaths related to heart disease. Compared to any other illness, we've made much greater progress in heart disease. But what I didn't tell you is what's on the right side of this picture. In the last 5 to 10 years, we've started to see an uptick in the number of people dying of heart attacks and cardiovascular disease, a big concern for me and for cardiologists across the country. The Americans actually saw that about 10 years earlier, They started to see a rise in heart attack and cardiovascular deaths by about 2010. We started to see it around 2018. And there has been a steady increase in deaths in both men and women related to cardiovascular illness in the last few years. Why are we losing the gains that we made over the previous 3-4 decades? Well, that has in part to do with a couple of demographic trends that we're seeing in Canada and really across the Western world. The Canadian population is getting older. As baby boomers hit the late 60s, 70s, and into their 80s, that's when cardiovascular disease often occurs. So the population is getting older as that bulge of the baby boomer population ages. But at the same time as the population getting older, there's also been a dramatic rise in weight and obesity across Canada and really around the world. Increasing age and obesity leads to a number of metabolic disorders. It causes blood sugar to rise, it causes blood pressure to go up, and it causes cholesterol to go up. Blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol. All three things that contribute to the formation of plaque, leads to heart attacks, and leads to strokes. We need to redouble the efforts. We need to combat these changes that are occurring. We need to make personal change to prevent this from happening to us and to our loved ones. And we can make those changes. Studies have shown that as much as 90% of the risk for developing heart disease, forming plaque, having a heart attack, stroke, are things that we can change, we can control. We can control our cholesterol. We can work on controlling our sugar and preventing diabetes. We can measure our blood pressure and make sure it's controlled. We can work at avoiding nicotine products, vaping and smoking, and avoiding habits that contribute to cardiovascular illness. And we can make an effort at combating obesity epidemic that's upon us, both through lifestyle changes, through diet and exercise. And now there are very effective medications also available to combat these various risk factors that can contribute to the development of cardiovascular illness. So it's really up to us to take that journey, to make that personal change that can help us lead healthier, longer lives. Because it takes many years for plaque to form, we make that change as early as possible. Studies have shown that plaque starts to form in our 20s and 30s, and it gradually progresses in the background. We're not aware that we are forming plaque inside our arteries, that our arteries are starting to narrow. And then it gets to a tipping point at which the plaque is just too much, it's under too much strain, there's too much inflammation in our blood vessels, and then the plaque ruptures open. It clots, and that's what triggers the heart attack, the stroke, the gangrene that can lead to limb loss and amputation. So the changes that we're going to be talking about are changes that have impacts across our body. It can stay healthy if we make those changes early, but there's never a point at which it's too late to make those changes. Even if you've started to form that plaque, you have heart disease, I'm going to show you that changes can make a huge difference even in that point. So is there actually evidence that we can make changes that can have a great impact? Well, we know the risk factors that can lead to heart disease. Poor diet, physical inactivity, smoking and other behaviors that injure our blood vessels. And when those blood vessels get damaged through those insults, through tobacco exposure, through poor diet, through physical inactivity, it leads to metabolic disorders that raise our sugar, our cholesterol, our blood pressure. It causes inflammation in the blood vessels, which damages the lining of the blood vessels, leads to plaque formation. Ultimately, it triggers a heart attack, a stroke, causes cognitive decline and dementia, and finally it can lead to cardiovascular death. But this pyramid at the bottom are things that we can control: our diet, our activity, our smoking, and our behaviors. And there is very good data that lifestyle changes can actually prevent chronic diseases. This is an example of one of those studies. The Diabetes Prevention Study, DPP. So this was a really remarkable study. We took a large number of people that were at risk for developing diabetes, a chronic disease that causes so much damage to our bodies. These people were at risk, they didn't have diabetes yet. And then we put them into 3 groups. One group, we said, go about your life, do what you've done. We didn't have any specific interventions we had them do. Another group, we gave them a medication called metformin, one that's used to treat or prevent diabetes. And the third group, we put them through an intensive lifestyle modification regimen of diet, exercise, smoking cessation, sometimes medications added to that. And then we watched these 3 groups for a number of years to see what happened. Could lifestyle changes and interventions prevent a chronic disease like diabetes? And what we saw is that sure enough, if we put people on medications, we could prevent diabetes. Metformin significantly reduced the onset of diabetes. But the best results were in the group that adopted lifestyle changes. They followed an appropriate diet, they exercised more, they quit smoking, they made that personal effort. They had the lowest rates of diabetes. So chronic diseases like diabetes can be prevented through personal change, things that we can change in our lives every day. But how about if you already have plaque formed? Your arteries have already narrowed, you have heart disease. Does lifestyle changes have any impact at that point, or is it too late? Well, again there, lifestyle changes can have an enormous impact. This is a study actually from a few years ago in patients that had plaque build up inside their arteries. In this case, in this picture, this person had plaque in their artery at the front of the heart called the LAD. The artery had narrowed. We took pictures of that through an angiogram, and then we put them through an intensive lifestyle regimen of diet, exercise, and changes to their personal behaviors. And then we went back a few years later and took pictures of those arteries again. Those that adopted an appropriate plant-based, healthier diet had significant reversal of plaque. So not only can we prevent disease, but if you have disease, we can reduce its progression, and in some people, we can reverse that disease. So it's never too late to adopt changes that can have an impact on our health. The power to change the onset and progression of disease lies with us. We need to make that personal change. So let's address what's causing the problem and not just mop up the mess. That's what lifestyle medicine is about. Does this describe you? Are you that non-smoker who's at a healthy weight, eats 5 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, and exercises about 30 minutes 5 times per week? If that's you, then congratulations. You are at an 80% lower risk of developing chronic diseases like diabetes, heart attacks, strokes, and even cancers. These types of healthy lifestyle choices we can make can help prevent so many chronic diseases that can come upon us as we get older. It's important that we make those changes as early as possible, but it's never too late to make those changes. And the goal of lifestyle medicine, as we've talked about, is not only to help people live longer, but to live healthier as they age, to extend the health span of Canadians. That part of their life where they're generally in good health, they can continue to engage in all of the activities that they've wanted to. And we know that the lifespan of Canadians has increased substantially over the last 100 years. The average Canadian is now living into their 80s. But the health span is on average about 8 years less. The average health span of a Canadian is around 73 years. And that means that the last 8 to 10 years, often people are very frail, they're impaired, they can sometimes be institutionalized, be in hospitals, long-term care facilities. They sometimes lead very unhealthy years in those golden years that they really wanted to enjoy. So the goal of lifestyle medicine is not only to help people live longer, but to live healthier as they age, so they can enjoy those final years. They don't get disabled, be institutionalized, and as much as possible be engaged in all of the things that they've enjoyed their whole life. That's what we're going to be talking about. How can we do that? How can we extend the health span of Canadians? But if you have heart disease already, as I've talked to you before, it's not too late. Making those changes can help prevent that disease from getting worse, and in some cases maybe even reverse that disease. And one effective way to do that is through cardiac rehabilitation. These are programs available to patients with heart disease or at high risk for heart disease. It's really a one-stop shop where those resources are made available to you to manage depression and anxiety through counseling and support, group education sessions on cholesterol management, blood sugar, weight management, blood pressure management, through dietary counseling, on-site supervised exercise, smoking cessation programs, all of these geared around helping you control your glucose and blood sugar, control your blood pressure, and manage your lipids or cholesterol. By doing all of that, even if you have heart disease, you can prevent it potentially from getting worse, and in some cases, reverse it. Does it have an impact? Does going through a cardiac rehab program actually make a difference? Studies have shown that it very much does so. Studies show that people with heart disease that go through a coordinated cardiac rehab program have a 20 to 25% lower risk of dying in the next 3 years. It reduces the risk of being hospitalized by over 40% within 6 months. It returns people back to work and their full life activities 50% faster. The impact of a coordinated program of lifestyle intervention through cardiac rehabilitation in patients with heart disease or high risk for heart disease is enormous. It's to give you the tools to be able to make that personal change, commit to that change that can lead to a healthier life in many ways. The first pillar of cardiac rehabilitation and lifestyle medicine is healthy eating. We want people to eat real foods, fresh foods, whole foods. Foods that look like what they are in nature. Eat the apple, not necessarily the apple pie. The more processed the food, the more the nutrients have been destroyed, additives have been added that can be deleterious to our health. We also encourage people to have more plant-based foods. As much as possible, a significant proportion of the calories should come from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts. Very healthy for our constitution, for our heart, and for our general health. You know, some people say, it runs in my family. So many people have had a heart attack in the family. Does it matter? If it's destiny, if my genes are going to cause this plaque buildup, trigger that heart attack, why am I putting all this effort into diet and lifestyle change? Well, it turns out that genes are not our destiny, dinner is. What do I mean by that? Well, David Katz is a researcher that looked at this to say, people that have genes in their family that leads to plaque buildup and heart attacks, if they make changes, can we change those genes? And it turns out we can. That's a concept called epigenetics. Even if you have the genes, if it runs in your family that you're at risk for heart attacks and strokes, you have genes that can lead to plaque buildup. If you follow healthier lifestyle, diet, exercise, avoiding smoking, you can turn off some of those genes. It's a concept called methylation. You have the genes. If the genes get methylated, they change their structure, and suddenly plaque starts to form. But the reverse is also true. If you turn off those genes by demethylating them, by getting rid of that trigger point that was leading to them getting activated, like a poor diet, you can turn down the impact of those genes. So even if it runs in your family, that doesn't have to be your destiny. You can make changes even if it's something that you've inherited within the family. And there's a lot of evidence that food choices have an enormous impact on that. We know that there are two categories of foods that lead to obesity and chronic diseases. Overly processed foods that are high in added fats, sugar, and salt, and foods that are too rich and too heavy with animal products and saturated fats. They lead to the obesity epidemic and cause chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease. But the reverse is also true, that diets that are higher in fiber, whole plant foods, vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, All of those are protective for our heart, the risk of diabetes, and other chronic diseases. So dietary choices can make an enormous impact on our heart health. Eating should be a way of life, not a diet. You want to eat real foods, whole foods, more plant-based foods, but not too much. It's about the quality of the food, but also the quantity. If there's just too much calories in your diet, you will gain the weight even if it comes from healthy foods. So it is about controlling the quality and quantity. As people try to incorporate more plant-based foods, they sometimes wonder, how am I going to get the protein? There are a number of protein sources from plants that are quite healthy. And we certainly know that in certain cultures there are things. The South Asian culture, lentils are very prominently used. In the East Asian culture, tofu is used as a sort of source of protein. And in the South American cultures, there's again a lot of nuts and tofu and quinoa and edamame, other things that can be incorporated into diets that are a good source of protein that can be healthy for us. So there's actually really delicious recipes available online. You have to seek it out. You don't have to eliminate all animal proteins, but incorporating plant proteins, having maybe a bit more fish in the diet, less beef and pork, more chicken, things like that. Choices that you can make that can both give you an adequate protein intake, but be healthier for your heart. So eat real foods. That's really the main message. Over-processed foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt make us crave more fat, sugar, and salt. Unfortunately, the food industry has become an industry. They want us addicted to certain things, and they know how to do it. By adding those things to processed foods, it makes us crave them even more. One of the things that's often added to processed foods is simple sugars. And simple sugars increase blood sugar, and they activate those genes that we talked about earlier, the genes that can lead to plaque formation and trigger heart attacks and strokes. So you want to try to reduce the amount of simple sugars in your diet. Pop, juices with sugars added to them, overly processed grains, things that really have no nutritional value but are adding a lot of empty calories that can lead to weight gain and can lead to chronic diseases. Omega-3 foods should be added to the diet. I always say to people, get your omega from foods, not capsules. A lot of people take omega supplements. There's actually been some recent studies to suggest that omega supplements can sometimes increase the risk of things like atrial fibrillation or heart arrhythmias. But those same omega, when it comes from foods, are heart healthy. And one of the things we think is that when it comes from a capsule, the omega may be getting into the bloodstream too quickly, and very high levels of the omega are circulating in the bloodstream for a few hours. And it ends up getting into things that it shouldn't necessarily get into that can trigger heart arrhythmias. Whereas if you get the omega from foods like fish, nuts, flaxseed, it's absorbed very slowly over the course of the day. The body can use it efficiently, and as a result, it's healthy. So the same thing when it comes from foods can be healthy, but if it comes as a supplement in a capsule, sometimes it can do harm. We want you to have more plant-based foods, about 30 different plants per week. And we want you to try to maintain an adequate protein intake, particularly as you get older. Maintaining muscle mass is essential, and that requires protein. The protein, again, can be from plant sources, some fish, and maybe more chicken, less beef, pork. So foods are essential. Making changes in our physical activity is the second pillar of lifestyle medicine and cardiac rehabilitation. And when we think about exercises, we want you to incorporate both aerobic or cardiovascular exercises, but also strength and resistance training, and maintain flexibility and balance. But mostly, it's about not sitting around all day. Getting active, incorporating activities into our daily living. Activity should be just part of living. It shouldn't necessarily always require going to a gym to do the physical activity. So when we think about physical activity, we want you to exercise regularly. 30 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity helps to reduce the risk of heart disease. Remember, the heart's a muscle. Every muscle gets stronger the more you work it. So if you work the heart in a safe manner, it will get stronger. Even with people with heart disease, heart muscle weakness, we know that if they exercise in a consistent, safe manner, they can help strengthen their heart. If you have heart disease, speak to your healthcare provider. What are the exercises that are safe for you to do? How can you help strengthen your heart through exercise? And if necessary, ask to be referred to a cardiac rehab program where you can be supervised for that type of exercises so you know what you can do safely. But incorporating physical activity is really important. Physical activity can also help to lower blood pressure and reduce the risk of diabetes. So even if you don't have heart disease, it can help prevent the onset of heart disease by reducing those risk factors that we talked about before. Every step counts. You often hear people say, oh, you need to get to about 10,000 steps. Well, a very large study of over 200,000 people showed that every step counts. Even people that are not doing any activity at all, if they start to walk as little as 5,000 steps in a day, they have a significant reduction in their rate of heart attacks, cardiovascular illness. And as little as adding 500 steps, which is not a lot of steps, to a day, can reduce the risk of cardiovascular death by 7%. If you can add an additional 1,000 steps, you get a 15% risk in dying of any cause. So every step you take counts, every effort you put in counts, and the more you can do, the better. Aerobic activity is essential. But at the same time, we want you to maintain strength training and do resistance training. These are examples of strength training. You don't have to join the gym. You don't have to be pumping metal. There are routine body weight-based exercises like squatting, sit to stand, different types of exercises that can help you maintain muscle mass. Why do we want you to do that? Maintaining muscle mass is certainly beneficial for metabolism. Much of the sugar and cholesterol in our body is metabolized and used up by muscle. If you maintain more muscle mass, you metabolize and use up those things more efficiently. But at the same time, maintaining muscle mass helps to prevent frailty. If you lose muscle mass, you'll lose your balance, you're much more likely to fall, to fracture a hip, to become impaired, become disabled. And maintaining muscle mass can help you do a lot of the daily activities as you get older, once you're in your 70s and 80s. As simple as climbing stairs for some people can become a challenge. But by maintaining muscle mass as they age, that can be much easier. Getting out of the car really requires you to have muscle mass in your arms and legs and your trunks. Standing up from a chair. So many daily activities require a good amount of muscle to be able to do them as we age. So as you get older, we don't want you to become more frail. We want you to try to maintain that so your risk of other chronic illnesses goes down. So, really important that we need to get moving. We need to incorporate physical activity. As I said, we want you to try to get to about 150 minutes of aerobic activity weekly. Between 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day is an important target to get to. If you can't get to that right away, as I said before, every step counts. Try to do a little bit more each day. Remember, every 500 steps you add to your day reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease events by as much as 7%. But remember to add strength and resistance training, not necessarily needing to go to the gym to do that. Body strength training can be incorporated into daily activities. There's a number of resources available online and other resources you can seek out from your healthcare provider as to what are safe strength training exercises you can incorporate. We also want you to maintain flexibility. Things like yoga, Pilates, but as simple as stretching exercises can help you maintain flexibility. That's also important so your risk of fall, fracture, injury, and disability goes down the more flexible you are. These three categories of physical activity will help you age in a healthy manner, help reduce the risk of frailty. The third pillar of lifestyle medicine and cardiac rehabilitation is improving sleep. Studies show that typically people need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep for best outcomes. Those that sleep between 7 to 8 hours of sleep have lower rates of heart attacks, strokes, and risk of dying. Sleeping a lot less can increase that, but if you sleep too much more and are not doing enough activities, it will also increase that. So you want to get up, get moving, stay active, but you also want to try to get enough sleep. So sleep is essential for both general health and cardiovascular health. On average, people should be getting about 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. For some people, that can be a challenge, and there are things that can impact that, but there are ways to overcome that. The concept of sleep hygiene. So when you're getting ready for bed, for maybe the hour or two prior to that, power down. Don't be getting into heated arguments or doing brisk activities just prior to that. It'll get you revved up, your brain will be working too hard, you won't be able to slow your brain down getting ready for sleep. For some people, prior to sleep, taking a warm bath can just slow things down so they're ready to sleep. We also know that the environment in which you sleep has an impact on the duration and the depth of sleep. We want you to get to deep sleep. If the room is too hot and too humid, sometimes it's really hard to stay asleep. Studies suggest that between 16 to 19 degrees Celsius temperatures in the room you're sleeping in can be a healthy environment to try to get to deep sleep for a longer duration. You also want to avoid eating in the 3 hours prior to going to bed. If you eat too late just before you go to bed, you'll get a surge of calories, a surge of sugar in your blood. That's going to overstimulate your brain. There's just too much sugar going up to your brain. That's going to make it overactive. It's going to be really hard to power down and get to that deep sleep we want you to get for those 7 to 8 hours. For those people that have pets at home, sometimes that can be a disturbance if the pets are also in the room. They may be moving around, making noises, getting up. That'll disturb your sleep. It'll become interrupted. And so for some people, having the pet not be in the bedroom can be another way to try to avoid interruptions of their sleep pattern. Important thing these days with all these phones that are connected to everything, you want to avoid screens in the bedroom. In the hour or two prior to that, don't be on the phone, don't be on your computer, avoid that blue light that can disrupt sleep patterns, avoid those activities in the bedroom. Bedrooms are really for sleep and intimacy only, not for be playing on our phones. Some of these strategies can help you get to that deeper sleep, but there are things that can still disrupt your sleep. If you're really suffering from insomnia, having trouble, speak to your healthcare provider. It could be as simple as some of the medications you're taking, the timing of those medications. If you take it too late, perhaps some of that can disrupt your sleep. Having too much caffeine late into the day, alcohol late into the day, all of those things, avoiding that or seeking out resources to try to get to deeper sleep. The next pillar I want to talk to you about is managing stress. Pillar 4 of lifestyle medicine and cardiovascular rehabilitation. We live in very stressful times. There's a lot of economic stress, political stress, social stress. In our personal lives, there's a lot of discord at times. All of those things trigger stress hormones. These are hormones that our body releases in response to stress. Our cortisol level goes up, our adrenaline level goes up. Those are all what are called fight or flight response. So remember, stress had a purpose. Why do we have a stress response? It was really a fight or flight response. When we lived in caves, lived in rural environments, as a species, if we were being attacked by an animal or at risk of a fire, or we had to run from a danger, you needed high cortisol levels. You needed high adrenaline levels so your heart could pump faster, it could work harder to get you away from that danger. The problem happens that nowadays, with the chronic stress that we're all dealing with due to all of these social and environmental factors, these stress hormones are circulating at high levels all the time. And your heart is working hard all the time in response to those hormones. So it is important to find strategies that can help to lower stress. Different things work for different people. These are some strategies that people have suggested may be helpful to reduce stress levels. But if you're really struggling, seek out resources. Speak to your healthcare provider about counseling and other supports that exist. Managing stress is really important. Chronic stress contributes to heart disease by increasing blood pressure, increasing cholesterol, and leading to inflammation in the heart and the blood vessels. And by controlling stress through relaxation techniques such as meditation, deep breathing, yoga, other strategies to reduce stress can help not only to reduce stress levels, but improve your heart health. At our cardiac rehab center at Cambridge Cardiac Care Center, we did a number of studies looking at the impact of things like deep breathing and yoga on cardiovascular health, and showed that those relaxation techniques have a significant impact on blood pressure, blood sugar, and really help to potentially reduce the risk of chronic heart disease. Seek out resources. See what works best for you. It's not one cookie cutter approach. Different things work for different people. Regular exercise and getting enough sleep, though, can also help to reduce stress level and improve overall health. So these things work synergistically. If we're exercising adequately, working on sleep, working on relaxation techniques, all of that works together to help reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. You know, in these times when there's so much strife and anxiety, and we're so concerned about all of the things that are going wrong in our world, there are some great things that are also happening. I know in my life there are many very positive things. So sometimes journaling, writing down what are the good things that happen, that gratitude journal, what are you grateful for? That can remind you that not everything is going wrong. There's actually a lot of good things happening, and it can help you stay positive. That's another strategy to remain connected and be mindful. I know when stress levels go up, our muscles become tense, and that feeds on itself. Muscle tension and pain causes more stress. Something as simple as massage therapy for some people is another way to help reduce stress levels. And sometimes you just need to get away from things. You need to pull yourself away from that environment that's causing you stress. Take that break. Health retreats for yourself, focusing on your interests, is again another way to reconnect with your world. Maintain that mind-body healthy engagement. But if it really starts to progress and you're struggling with managing stress and anxiety and depression, seek out resources. Speak to your healthcare provider. There's a lot of counseling and support available in our communities. Seek it out. There are ways that we can help people cope with things much more effectively. The next pillar I want to talk to you about is forming and maintaining relationships. You'll remember Dr. Peter Lynn actually talked about that in his discussion about blue zones. And one of the things that we've learned from these zones is that these communities where people live into their 90s and 100s are communities that are very engaged. They're interconnected. People have great social supports. They're connected with their families, their friends, their social network. They engage with them on a daily basis. They have good spiritual support through prayer, presence, and community engagement. That type of social support, that integration, we're all in this together. That sense of community and maintaining those relationships is actually very powerful for preventing chronic diseases, and is one of the reasons why these blue zones have people living for so long and living so healthy. They are interconnected. They're helping each other. And so certainly we know that human beings are social beings. We like to stay connected with other people. We like to engage with other people. But you know, when you are better connected, you do a whole bunch of other things that are also healthy. When we eat together, we often eat healthier foods. If we cook together, we're cooking fresh foods. If we exercise together, we can sometimes motivate each other. I know there are times when I lose motivation, I'm tired, I really don't want to do that type of activity. And when I'm working out or exercising with my wife and friends, that helps me stay motivated. People that smoke, I often say to them, if you're trying to quit smoking, find a buddy who's also trying to do that. Working together on a task to change a behavior, often another person that's going through that can encourage you. When you lose your motivation, they can pick you up. And reverse, when they're losing their motivation, you can pick them up. We're in this together. And that type of social connection has so many benefits for our general health. The sixth pillar I want to talk to you about is avoiding risky behaviors that can lead to illness. Certainly tobacco being one of those exposures you really want to avoid. Tobacco, whether it comes from cigarettes or vaping, is very deleterious to your health. It damages your heart, it damages your lungs, it increases the risk of cancers. There are so many illnesses that get accelerated by exposure to tobacco. Other things to be cautious with is too much alcohol, illicit drugs that can damage the heart, and certainly avoiding environments with high pollutants and chemicals and preservatives can also be deleterious to our health. But tobacco exposure in particular we need to reduce. And you know what? We were winning that battle on tobacco and cigarettes until the pandemic. Since the pandemic, we've seen a big upsurge in the rates of smoking and vaping in Canada, and that is a big concern for me and for all cardiologists. It's hard to quit smoking, I know that. But you know what? Even if you can't quit altogether, every reduction in smoking and vaping reduces the risk of heart attacks, strokes, and cancers. This is a study that was done from McMaster University led by Dr. Youssef. And what they showed in this study is that those that smoke, if they make a reduction, have a significant benefit, even if they didn't quit altogether. Obviously, if you can quit, your risks are the lowest. But say, for example, you smoke a pack a day. If you can cut that from a pack a day to half a pack, you've cut your risk by 50%. You cut it down further, from half a pack to a quarter pack, again, you've reduced your risk. So every time you make the effort to quit smoking, even if you're not fully successful, if you cut it down, that has a big impact. And there are a lot of resources available for people. Our cardiac rehab center at Cambridge Cardiac Care Center has a robust smoking cessation program, but those programs exist at other centers, healthcare facilities, primary healthcare teams have smoking cessation programs. Seek it out in your community. What are resources available to you to help you quit that habit? And keep making the effort. Don't get frustrated if you start to make that effort but you aren't able to quit. Even if you cut it back, that'll have an impact. Keep working at it. Studies show that it takes people about 6 to 7 attempts at quitting smoking before they're fully successful. That's not a sign of failure. That's a sign of how addictive this substance is. And we need to continue to make the effort as a society to reduce young people from taking up that habit and help people who are smoking or vaping to quit tobacco altogether. We know how to help people quit. Seek out those resources. There are strategies available, resources available in your community. But you know what? For some people, even if they put all of that effort in, they work on their diet, they work on exercise, they work on all of these various pillars of lifestyle medicine that we've talked about, sometimes they still end up needing medications to get their blood pressure down, get their cholesterol down, control their sugar. That's not a sign of failure. You've put that effort in, you still end up needing a medication. Don't take that on as a personal failure. I didn't do enough. Sometimes there are genes that just are more than what diet and exercise can control. So if you end up needing medications to help supplement the effects of lifestyle changes, that's not a sign of failure. That's a sign that you're taking your health seriously and you're going to put every effort into reducing chronic illnesses. Medications can also help you in that journey. And we know that there's a group of medications that have been shown in large studies to help reduce the risk of heart attacks, strokes, kidney failure, heart failure. Things like blood thinners, like antiplatelets, like aspirin, can help reduce in some people the risk of blood clotting and triggering heart attacks. Not everybody needs to be on aspirin, but those that do or that require blood thinners, it can supplement other efforts. Controlling blood pressure is essential, and you can do some of that through diet and lifestyle changes, but sometimes, again, it's not enough. Our genes drive that blood pressure up. So there are very effective medications, for example, ACE inhibitors and beta blockers that have been shown to both reduce the development of heart disease, but also, if you have it, reduce the complications of heart disease. Cholesterol is really key. Cholesterol is really what builds up inside the plaque, inside the arteries that leads to heart attacks and strokes. So controlling cholesterol is essential. Again, you can do some of that through lifestyle changes with diet, but what you have to remember, diet only contributes about 15% of the cholesterol in your blood. 85% of cholesterol is made by your body. and diet can't change that. If you have the genes that cause high cholesterol, sometimes lifestyle changes are not enough. But fortunately, we have very effective medications like statins and other groups of medications that help to lower cholesterol that have been studied in hundreds of thousands of people. We know how effective they are. We know their impact at preventing heart attacks and strokes, and they are strategies that will augment and work with your lifestyle changes to reduce your risk of heart attacks and strokes. And finally, keeping your sugar controlled and controlling or preventing diabetes is essential. And again, there, diet and lifestyle exercise can help control that, but often that's not enough. Controlling blood sugar is essential. Fortunately, we now have a significant advancement in our management of diabetes. New classes of drugs for diabetes management not only help to control sugar, but they can help with weight loss, reduce plaque formation, reduce the risk of heart attacks, heart failure, kidney failure, all of the things that we're concerned about with diabetes. So, I want you to check. If you're on medications, you've been on them for many years, 20 years you've been on your diabetic med, maybe 20 years ago that's the best that there was. But there's been huge advancements. So when you're in to see your healthcare provider, ask them, are you on the best class of medications to protect your heart, your kidneys, your brain from the effects of diabetes? Just because you were prescribed that a number of years ago, there's been huge advancements. And maybe it's time to update those medications, get on to the newer classes that have greater benefits. So staying engaged in your personal health, taking that initiative to seek out resources and say, am I on the right medications to reduce my risk? What else can I do to help reduce that risk? Taking that personal initiative has huge payoffs. So ultimately, these are the targets I want you to remember. We talked about them earlier in my previous presentation. Check your blood pressure regularly at your healthcare provider, at your pharmacy, or get a blood pressure cuff to use at home. And keep track of the numbers. I want you to remember that your blood pressure should be below 130/80. You can do some of that through lifestyle changes, reducing the amount of salt in your diet, increasing physical activity. If you have sleep disorders like sleep apnea, treating that can also help lower your blood pressure. But sometimes you need medications to do that. And if you do, that's not again a sign of failure. It means that you're taking your health seriously and you're doing everything you can to reduce complications. Know your cholesterol. As we've talked about, cholesterol is what leads to that plaque buildup. Know what it is. Unless you know what it is, how are you going to control it? You should know that it's important to keep cholesterol as low as possible. There is no too low a cholesterol. Ideally, the bad cholesterol or LDL should be kept below 1.8. Some of that you can do through, again, a low-fat, low-simple sugar diet that's higher in fiber. Some of it, again, you can do through physical activity. But as I've talked to you before, 85% of the cholesterol in your body is made by your body. So if it's still high after you've made those changes, there are very effective medications that have been studied in hundreds of thousands of people to help lower that cholesterol and reduce your risk of a heart attack or stroke. Seek that out. Know your number. Find out from your healthcare provider, are there ways you can lower it further? And again, check your blood sugar. Make sure you're working at preventing diabetes, and if you have it, controlling it effectively. So these are things I want you to take home, remember, and work at day to day. That's how we will win the battle against cardiovascular disease. By changing our lifestyle, by following a heart-healthy diet, reducing the amount of alcohol in our diet, increasing physical activity, and quitting smoking, not only do we reduce heart attacks and strokes, but we reduce other chronic illnesses like diabetes, kidney failure, and even cancers. So the impact of these changes is not just for your heart health, but it's for your general health. It'll keep you living longer, but also, and equally or more importantly, live you healthier. That health span, how much of those golden years when you get older will you be able to be enjoying effectively? Prevent frailty, prevent falls, prevent fractures, prevent disability. So many chronic illnesses that happen as we age are things we can reduce and prevent by adopting healthy lifestyle changes early, but at every age, lifestyle changes has a huge impact. Even if you have some of those conditions, by making those changes, it's never too late. So ultimately, prevention begins with you. You have to make those changes. Replace unhealthy habits with healthier ones. It's one step at a time. That one-step approach can help guide you to know and stay motivated. And start off just literally with that one step. As I showed you before, just adding 500 extra steps to your walking every day reduces your risk of heart disease by 7%. 1,000 more steps reduces the risk of dying by 15%. Start off perhaps by going for a 10-minute walk and then gradually increase that. Try to go to 15 minutes, maybe go a little faster. These are step-by-step processes, and try to adopt a heart-healthy diet, one that has less processed foods in it, that is richer in plant-based foods, less salt, less fat, less simple sugars. These changes are gradual changes you need to make, that you need to stick to over the long term. The payoff is enormous. It takes time, it takes dedication, it requires you to stay motivated, and it requires personal change. We talked before about the idea of SMART goals. I hope you've set some of those SMART goals from what we've talked about today from our various speakers. It's time now to implement those SMART goals. Set that goal, set that time you're going to achieve it, and let's get to work to get it done. What an exceptional day. What an exceptional event. I'm so honored to have had the opportunity to work with such accomplished teachers, professors that have taught me so much this morning. I hope you enjoyed this event as much as I do, our 21st annual Healthy Heart Day. As you can imagine, an event like this takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of teamwork, and it takes a huge number of people to put it together. The leader of that team is Pandey. She is a former ICU pharmacist and current researcher at the Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre. She leads an exceptional group of healthcare providers dedicated to advancing the science of cardiovascular medicine, but also creating a healthy environment for our community. She's the head of our cardiac rehab program and really champions the heart health of our community. For Michelle, Healthy Heart Day is a personal journey. As many of you know, we started this event 21 years ago when we lost Michelle's mom, Grandma Linda, to the ravages of diabetes and heart disease at a very young age. It was a tragedy for our family. It really shook us up. But Michelle took that as a mission statement, an opportunity to give back to our community in honor of her mother, Grandma Linda, to say we can do better. We can give our community resources to live a heart-healthy life. I thank Michelle for her dedication and her hard work to put this event together every day. But an event like this requires a large team. And that team is led by the chairman of the board of directors of the Cambridge Prevent Clinic, Dr. Michael Lowry. Mike is a colleague and close friend. He's the former chief of staff at Cambridge Memorial Hospital and a former compliance officer at the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. He's an accomplished and award-winning teacher who has taught me the processes at which to put a team together, how to keep them motivated, and how to build this event year after year. Another member of the board of the Cambridge Prevent Clinic is Keshta Sanaki. She's the patient and community representative who is so engaged in our community. She leads our social media event and plans this event year after year, helps to get the word out, helps to make sure everyone is motivated to do the best that we can for our community. It's her dedication and her commitment to this event that helps it become successful year after year. But this committee that leads Healthy Heart Day is a large committee chaired by Dr. Michael Lowry, Rakesh Disanaki. I'm honored that Dr. George Matai has joined this committee. He is a retired respirologist from Cambridge Memorial Hospital, and we're so happy that he's part of the Healthy Heart Day Committee. Other members of the committee include Jennifer Devenish, Stephen Gray, Councillor Doug Craig, Patrick Ramcharatar, Jal Wadia, Tony Rubel, Ottavio Travo, Nelia Luro, Ashok Pandey, and Michelle Pandey that I introduced you to earlier. But an event like this obviously requires a lot of resources. It couldn't be put together without the donations that we've received from various community groups and organizations, and it's really important for me to recognize them. Our media sponsors include Rogers TV, the Waterloo Record, 96.7 Chime FM, 106.7 Country FM, and News Radio Kitchener. Our corporate sponsors include AstraZeneca Canada, Bayer Canada, Merck Canada, Amgen Canada, Pfizer Canada, Boehringer Ingelheim Canada, HLS Therapeutics, KMH Cardiology Centers, and a new corporate sponsor this year, Space Labs Healthcare. Our community sponsors include the City of Cambridge, the Cambridge North Dumfries Ontario Health Team, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, the NAP Group of Dominion Securities, and Element Print and Copy. I thank all of these various sponsors for their commitment to put this event on. In these economically challenged times, it's hard to get the resources, and many events and community groups are struggling to continue to function due to limited resources. We are very fortunate to have such dedicated corporate, community, and media sponsors that have helped us put this event on year after year, helped us to spread the word on how each of us can lead a heart-healthy life. I thank them for their commitment to this community. This event, as you know, is put on by the Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre, and we have a dedicated staff of exceptional healthcare providers that work day after day tirelessly to advance healthcare in the Cambridge, Kitchener-Waterloo region. Their dedication to heart health is how this event is put on year after year. As you know, this event is put on in memory of Grandma Linda that I mentioned earlier. We lost her before her 70th birthday to the ravages of heart attack, diabetes, and cardiovascular complications. She was an accomplished healthcare provider, a nurse that worked in Toronto, who dedicated her life to the health of others. And it was such a tragedy for our family when she passed away. It's in her memory that this event is put on year after year. Grandma Linda, we will always remember you, we will always love you, and we cherish your memory. It guides us year after year. But I have to acknowledge you, the participants of this event. It's for you that this event is put on again this year. I'm glad that you stayed with us. I'm glad that you've made a commitment to keeping yourself healthy, your family healthy, and your community healthy. It's through education, it's through personal commitment that we can have a healthy community that lives longer, but lives healthier. And that's a journey we're all on together. I hope you enjoyed the event today, and I hope you'll join me again next year for our next Healthy Heart Day. I promise it'll be at least as good, hopefully better.